Policy work session for August 13th, 2019 is now in session. Pam, roll call please.
Mrs. Belford? Present. Mrs. McDougall?
Present.
Mrs. Deskovich?
Present.
Mr. Susan?
Present.
And Ms. Campbell?
Present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have 7 policy revisions that will be presented to the board today. This will be the board's opportunity to ask questions, have discussion, and provide input. These policies will be brought back during a rule development workshop on August 27th, 2019, providing the community its first opportunity for input. These policies are slated for public hearing and approval on September 10th. First is School Board Policy 3122. Dr. Beth Betty, Deputy Superintendent and Chief Human Resource Officer, will provide us the purpose of the proposed revisions.
This policy is being revised to update the contact information for the district compliance officers to identify the areas of non-discrimination and anti-harassment that will be handled by each compliance officer, inclusion of the retention of investigative records and materials language, and other changes in compliance with applicable Florida law. The particular areas of revision include the title change to include non-discrimination, contact information and designate areas of non-discrimination and anti-harassment for each compliance officer, and the addition of the retention of investigatory records and materials section. And these all are, let me start again. These proposed revisions encompass suggested language from Neola. Any questions?
Do you want to scroll down to the red line?
Yeah.
Can that help?
I just have one question.
Certainly.
Why is it web space site instead of website?
Web space site, where are you looking?
It starts in number 3, I think.
Okay. I
It's
see
just
it.
a
I see
style
it.
thing, but it's
On A3?
It's on number 3. We see where it says number 3 underneath. No, you're not in the right place. It's after the compliance B3.
yeah.
After the compliance officers. Right
Oh, yes.
It's a
down.
compound word, correct?
It is down on number 3. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. I got it. I have no excuse.
Well, it's funny because I looked it up because I thought maybe I was wrong.
No.
And they said that it actually can be either way, that it used to be web space site instead of a compound word, but it's the more common usage today is all one word.
Yeah, we can get that changed.
Any other board members have any questions or concerns on policy 3122?
Straightforward.
Dr. Betty will also provide us information on the proposed revisions to Board Policy 3362, anti-harassment.
3362, anti-harassment. This policy is being updated with technical changes only. Particular areas of revision include the removal of the compliance officers' names and updating compliance officers' contact information and other formatting changes.
Board members, take a minute to scroll through the red lines if you'd like.
I have 2 quick things if nobody else has.
Go ahead,
Did you have your
Miss-
hand up, Katie?
Well, you were talking about removing names, but didn't we just leave the names on the other one?
We redlined through the names and we put the titles.
Okay, on the one we just
Okay, okay, yeah. And we did the same thing on this one.
Okay, that's a good idea.
I have 2 quick things on number 2.
What letter are you on?
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm trying to pull it up.
Sure. What we one?
I am not connected to the internet.
Ew.
Okay. On number 2, under A, general policy statement, it seems to me like perhaps it should say the superintendent or designee will vigorously enforce. Just an opinion thing.
But isn't that just used when it's like a specific, needs to do something specific, like at a certain time? Rather than just generally?
That may be.
The superintendent will investigate all allegations of
Wait, you're on number 2?
unlawful harassment.
She's on
Yeah.
A2.
A2.
And if you go further
And
down,
then,
in
yeah,
that
another
same
one
paragraph.
will investigate.
Yeah, it says that he is going to, or he or she would investigate, but he's not necessarily going to investigate.
You don't want to investigate documents?
You will cause to be investigated.
That sounds like
designates.
a complicated way of saying it.
I don't.
I don't know if it's
I like
necessary, I mean, it just stood out to me that, like, I don't think Dr. Mullins is gonna go and ask the
Let's
questions.
put the designee in there.
Some of
So-
the language, and I don't know that this language is, some of the language that says superintendent will is actually statutory. And,
Okay.
you know, there's, in other policies, there's language about that. I don't know that this is or not, but I think it mimics those others.
Yeah.
Again,
We'll
I
check
don't
to see
think,
if it's,
I don't think it's statutory, but we come up with it.
yes.
And then I had one other, down in H, under formal process. Number 3. It says, may file a formal complaint either orally or in writing with the teacher, principal, or other district employee, the compliance officer, superintendent, or other district employee.
Oh, double.
And then further down in that same paragraph, there's the same basic thing with doubled up other district employee.
Yep, thank you.
Good catch, Ms. Belford.
Also, if you go back to A2, it says the superintendent will vigorously enforce its prohibition. I think it should probably be this, not its, cause it's not,
Good
its
call.
is wrong, right?
Where are you aiming?
A2. I'll have investigation. Where else did you say, you said H3 and,
They were both in H3, there's just 2 sentences in that one paragraph that have the same other district
Yep.
employee, sorry.
Any other board members have any questions or comments about policy 3362? Okay, we'll move on to policy 5112, entrance requirements. Chris Moore, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, will provide information regarding revisions.
Alright, this policy is being revised to clarify entrance requirements for students entering the district for the first time and other changes in compliance with applicable Florida law. Particular areas of revision include the following: defines parent legal guardian requirements to disclose student information related to prior school expulsions, arrests resulting in charges, juvenile justice actions, and corresponding referrals to mental health services by the school district that the student previously attended. The registration forms have already been revised to incorporate the statutory requirements, and these proposed revisions encompass the suggested language from Neola. Just to clarify, you guys might remember last year we added some language on our registration paperwork about Baker Act. The statute 7026 was kind of vague about what it was that they were looking for there, so that was how it was interpreted. Senate Bill 7030 really clarified that it was looking for mental health referrals related to arrests, expulsions, etc. So the changes that we made are on A4. We added the entrance requirements for students in transition. That was in Neola. It's part of our practice already. We just added it into policy. And then number 4, which was about requiring parents to tell us about mental health referrals related to expulsions, arrests, or juvenile justice actions.
So
That
the
is-
question, what's the question now read on our registration forms?
It's on the bottom.
Is that mandated by state law that we ask these questions?
It is.
That's my that's why I wanted to
Yeah,
know.
it is.
Okay, cause I think
Oh,
it's
we
a little
did.
intrusive.
Well, I think one of the issues that we run into sometimes is that
The
we
bottom
have
where?
these students
Yeah.
coming in from outside the county and we don't know what their
Keep
needs
going.
are. And when we have issues that they have, it's easier to understand what they're getting themselves into. Does that make sense, Sharon? That's
Mental
where
health,
I-
I'm
last
sorry, I
page
come from a
before.
different point of view. Mental health is very confidentiality driven, and I get nervous when people have access to these files that maybe shouldn't have access to the files. So that's why I'm asking the question, if it's state driven, so.
I think it's a valid concern, and it is a concern that we've all talked about as well, but it is in state statute 7030. As far as the registration paperwork, it's on page 4 under student disclosures. The title of it reads Student Disclosures Required at School Registration in accordance with Florida statutes and the procedures established by the school board. Each student at the time of initial registration for school in the school district shall note previous school expulsions, arrests resulting in a charge, and juvenile justice actions that the student had. It asks the question, is the student presently under suspension or expulsion from another school? It asks, has the student ever been arrested and charged? It asks, is the student currently under juvenile system actions? Is the student under community control? And the statement that was added is, has the student been referred for corresponding mental health services by a school district for the disclosures above?
That's actually better, Cheryl, than it has been in the past, because
Okay.
before it was, have they ever been
corrected?
No, I thought it was
No,
even
have
more,
they ever
had mental health referral. I mean, it was very vague.
It was very, very, very vague, and I know that was part of the discussion last year, which led us down the path of the Baker Act piece, because there was no guidance on what to
Yeah.
put on
Mhm.
there.
So as far as, it wasn't red lines, so the only thing that's changed then is that last.
The very
question.
last question, that's correct.
So basically, this is more about if you've had involvement with the DJJ in some way, some suspension or law, and so this is more where we're heading towards.
Yeah, it's not suspension, but any expellable offense, even if you're, if that was held in abeyance. If a student, I don't wanna quote the statute, but there's new language around the fact that if there's a serious infraction within a school, there should be a corresponding mental health referral. This is capturing that, so that students don't transfer out of the district or from home education or some other private school after an expellable offense, and the school district not know that there was some related health services involved.
So a student comes to our school, checks yes on all those boxes, and now it says any student who discloses any of the above matters, we must refer to policy 5500 and 5610. Placement and assignment of students. So they've been expelled, let's say, in another county. It's been over a year, they were expelled for a full year, and they move here. Is it our responsibility to now enroll them in school here, or do we then have some kind of hearing and decide where they go? What's that process look like?
There's like many different answers to that question. If they have been expelled and they still haven't been, maybe let's say it's not a felony. They've been expelled, they've served their time, it is not a felony, they come here to register. If they follow all of our entrance requirements, they have fulfilled their discipline that they needed for their infraction, then yes, they enroll with us. If they are coming to us as a felony suspension, then there is a hearing to determine, what is our next step, and that could be either enrolling in the school or it could be held in abeyance and sent to the ALC.
So the hearing is like our current expulsion hearing, it comes before the school board, or who is on, how does this work?
No, it doesn't go in front of the school board, and it's not a hearing, they don't do a stipulation conduct agreement like you normally would for an expulsion. It is to say that while you are under this felony suspension, you're gonna be going to an alternative site. If they commit an expellable infraction while they're at the alternative site, and we've had that, then they have a hearing like you're used to. But as long as they're under a felony suspension, they attend an alternative site if that is what's determined by the administration and in conjunction with student services and leading and learning.
What's a felony suspension?
They have committed a suspension dealing with weapons, drugs. Help me out, Stephanie. something else?
Anything that would be a felony if committed by an adult is how the language reads. Per state law, we receive notifications on arrest and a state attorney's charge. At an arrest, it is a notification of the faculty and staff. At a state attorney's charge, we conduct a hearing to determine if the offense could present an impact to the school environment. So for example, weapons, serious drug cases, we just got one in today that was a stalking charge where the victim is at the school. That's obviously an impact. That student is relocated. The law calls for a hearing and a placement decision, and the student's removed if there's an impact on the school.
So let me give you an example of there wouldn't be. So some of the arrests that we have for theft are felonies because of the value of the item they have stolen. That typically does not end up with a placement at the ALC. The ones that Stephanie listed, those typically do.
So what happens if somebody lies on this form, like they don't answer truthfully.
All
Not
the
that
time.
anybody
All
would
the
do
time.
that, but I'm just wanting to know what are the consequences.
Actually, one more thing to charge them with.
I mean, I'm just asking.
Well, there,
As you know,
there-
people are.
there
They
is
do have a
this-
certification at the bottom.
Right,
Right.
there is this little thing that says, if you have lied on this form, we can charge you with a misdemeanor. I don't know in the history of our board if we've ever actually,
Never done that.
But it also
Done
gives
that?
us the opportunity to address the correct. We had a situation, the reason I said I liked it was we had a situation at Kennedy, it's specific not to the mental health piece, but actually the discipline policy. They jumped ship from another county and they came over here just because the kid was expelled and tried to enroll him immediately. And it just wasn't a good thing. So I think that in those cases, it works out really well. And that disclaimer at the bottom, yeah, they will get a misdemeanor, lie on their stuff, and we'll prosecute you, because Dr. Mullins is investigating.
right, right. So the other, Ms. Deskovich, the other case scenarios are exactly what Mr. Susan was just talking about. A student is under expulsion from another district and comes here and tries to enroll. Typically, when we go and we do a records request from their previous school district, if they've lied, we find that out. They complete their expulsion, whatever their contract was in the other district with us.
Okay, so what I'm trying to figure out in my mind is if somebody, a student, if a current student of ours does something, trying to think of the appropriate words, has a weapon, threatens the school, and we expel. We can only expel for a year. Is that correct? No?
One yes, one no.
It's not, it's
Oh,
not
I'm sorry, yes,
correct.
I apologize. I'll defer to
Sorry,
Stephanie.
I'm sorry, we have a legal obligation to, act for a minimum of 1 year.
Okay.
So the year is actually a minimum. We've had a couple of cases where we have exercised beyond the minimum, and that, past that, and that's with Dr. Mullins' approval. We've had a couple of serious cases in this district where we applied that discretion, and particularly if it's in like March, then we might go through the following year as well. But it's been less than a handful of cases in very serious circumstances. It's in statute that we are required to do a minimum on those cases.
Is there a maximum? What I'm trying to get at, if someone was a real threat, a real concern, and we feel like this child should never come back to our school. I've been under the impression up until now that we had no authority after a year, like we have to let them back, or we have to revisit it and have another hearing or something of that nature.
We have more authority than a year, again, it's a minimum, and what we've done in those cases is review. So we have to also look at where the legal case has ended up, what the charges are in this situation. But in the handful of really serious ones that we've had, we have extended all opportunities, because they're typically older children. And so, I'm being vague on purpose. I'm being vague on purpose, but in those cases, I've worked directly with Dr. Mullins, we've worked with student services, we double check laws, and we make the decision in the best interest of the district as a whole when it's very serious infraction.
What I'm trying to, the big picture I'm trying to get at is a student from another county that had a serious violation like that, they get expelled for a year and then they county hop, right, or something, come here and enroll. Do we have any authority, because she has not done anything here in our district?
We do, we have
To like,
we have the authority exactly as it happened in our district.
oh, okay.
So the state law says that everything that was there is also here. Some of those cases are really neat and clean, some are super duper messy, but we have that authority. Sometimes we just have to take a few days to gather that information, and we have exercised that authority on many occasions.
That's what I was trying to understand.
Sorry,
Thank you.
I didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, that's okay. Normally I should just defer to Patricia and you on those very detailed questions, so.
We were shaking our heads in the same direction with each other, though. The good news is,
And that's
we were
all
going
that
in the same
counts.
direction.
That's all that
So I have a very loosely related comment on this that really has nothing to do with the policy, but I just want to put it out there for food for thought, especially as we're preparing our legislative discussions. I continue to be very bothered that compulsory education does not start until 6 in the state of Florida. I feel like that sends a message to parents that kindergarten is not important. And, so I don't know if that's something that we want to have discussion with our legislators about. I don't know the reasoning for compulsory education starting at 6, so maybe someone who's been around a lot longer, may have more insight into that. But I feel like especially when we know how critically important that early childhood education is to K-12 success for students, that having compulsory ed start at 6 makes no sense. So, food for thought for later discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Belford. Anybody else have any questions, comments, or concerns on this policy? Okay, we are at board policy 5330, which is also facilitated by Ms. Moore.
I just want to make sure that everybody can see Patricia Fontan behind me. She's our local expert on medical marijuana and everything that we have gone through for this policy. Only through research.
Expert on the policy.
On the
of
policy.
marijuana.
Only through research.
Marijuana.
Only through
She's
research.
wearing green.
This policy is being revised due to the requirements of section 1006.62, and I actually want to read that exactly from statute because it contains a few more things. This is again statute 1006.62. Each district school board shall adopt a policy and a procedure for allowing a student who is a qualified patient, as defined in section 381.986, to use marijuana obtained pursuant to that section. Such policy and procedures shall ensure access by the qualified patient, identify how the marijuana will be received, accounted for, and stored, and establish processes to prevent access by other students and school personnel whose access would be unnecessary for the implementation of this policy. There's a note on the policy that says this. It provides it is the intent of this legislator to implement Section 29, Article 10 of the state constitution by creating a unified regulatory structure. If Section 29, Article 10 of the state constitution is amended or a constitutional amendment related to cannabis or marijuana is adopted, this act shall expire 6 months after the effective date of such amendment. So, there are particular areas of revision which include the following: procedures for storage of emergency medication, language pertaining to medical marijuana, and the addition of legal guardian terminology. These proposed revisions encompass the suggested language from Neola. That is not true. How did that end up on there? Strike that last bullet and I will explain. So we got the statute language and it said, you shall. You will make this part of your district policy. Neola has come out and said, thou shalt not. This is in violation of federal guidelines and we are not going to recommend a policy to you. That one, Patricia Fontan, got a group of people together, including district personnel, principals, teachers, resource teachers, community members. Did I miss anybody? Parents. And started this conversation. At the end of the day, the parents' recommendation is, the task force recommendation is no policy. However, because it's statute driven, we have a policy to bring to you. But this work session is really to get the wishes of the board about how they want to proceed. So the first decision point is policy or no policy.
Anybody would like to start?
What was the reasoning for the task force recommending no policy?
Because there's a lot of ifs, nobody knows, a lot of unknowns. The mindset was the responsibility of the school people, the responsibility of disruption every time the parent, because the way it runs, the parent has to come in, get the kid, do what they have to do, and leave. And a lot of back and forth that the parent would have to come in order to qualify caregiver, because it may not be the parents. And we would have to verify that the qualified caregiver, we have to find a location for them to provide the administrative the medical marijuana, and then they have to leave. There's a lot of fear of what if the kid brings it to school? I mean, we go through the whole round, what if they're handing it out to other kids at school? So they just felt, overall, they felt like there was too many unknowns. They wanted to just wait and see how it happened. We did have discussion. There's a lot of school districts around us who already have the policy. Volusia has one, Orange, Broward, Osceola, I mean, a lot of school districts have developed because they follow the statute. I haven't heard anything about why it's not working. I really haven't heard, we keep hearing about is when we don't develop one, the parents who have children who really need this get very upset. I don't think, and I think we've had a couple of 3 parents who've requested this, and when we explained our procedures and what they would have to do, because we can't store it, we can't have it in our school, they have to come in and administer. That's a lot of onus is on the parent to follow through with that. Now, our policy does says, in situations that this cannot be done in the home, we really want to encourage the parents if they can do it before school,
Yeah.
after school, but if it really has to happen on school, there's really a lot of procedures they would have to follow.
So I think it would be helpful to go through the policy as it's written, and you can kind of get a lot of exactly what she said, those concerns are written into the policy, and then we could go back to question 1 if that would be helpful.
Can you please clarify if this is oil or inhalable
Right,
or?
it's oil.
Permissible forms, it's in the policy. The permissible forms of medical marijuana means non-smokable products such as oils, tinctures, edible products, or lotions that can be administered and fully ingested, absorbed in a short period of time. Prohibited forms of medical marijuana, cannabinoid, is that how you say it?
Cannabinoid.
Perfect. Means smokable vapors, patches, or any other forms of administration that provide continuous delivery of medical marijuana to a qualified paper while at school shall not be permissible.
Ms. Moore, can I ask a quick question? Are there any other already existing drugs that follow the same pattern where individuals have to come on with a caregiver? Is there any, this would be the first one of this nature?
This would be the first one of this nature.
And then,
But we do have, some of them are controlled substances. that
right,
have-
I'm just saying, they're talking about the burden of it. And then,
Right. And I'll just address that. Part of this is because the legality of storing medical marijuana or transporting medical marijuana, DOH has said you may not store it in a clinic, and none of our nurses or health techs will touch it.
right,
So it has to have a qualified caregiver to deliver that, and we don't want our own people
right.
being responsible
Per
for that.
statute, right?
And we also have, the statute also provides that it does not apply to our employees, so therefore
Yeah.
our drug-free workplace policy and all that applies, so we can't have our employees touching, handling,
Right.
storing, or any of
Right.
that stuff. So this
Right.
is a controlled way of, if the board decides to move that way, of having the qualified patient, as the term is defined, be administered by the registered caregiver.
We already have students that come down and take medication inside the clinics, correct?
Correct.
So the actual location would probably, if we did this, be the location of the clinic. It's not like,
That's one of the choices that we bring to you today. The way the policy has been written, it gives the principal the autonomy to meet with the parent and determine the best location for giving the student, for administering the medical marijuana. Whether that's in the clinic or in their office or whatever they decide, this is the best, most private place to do it. The other choice is to ask the parent to check the child out, to bring them down to the front office, check them out, leave school campus, and bring them back. So we don't designate the clinic, we say it's a decision that the principal makes in this writing of the policy.
You weren't talking about storing it, were you?
no.
Okay, that's why I
No,
was
what I'm
shaking my
saying
head.
is that if we've already got an existing situation, because if a kid brings I'm a kid that, if I have any kind of controlled substance, it is known that you are not supposed to bring that on campus, distribute that, take that, whatever that is, right? So we already have an existing policy in place to address those issues. I'm trying to figure out what we already have in place and what we don't, and then the comparisons to the state law and the liability we have for not following the state law and state
Yeah.
statute, and do we open ourselves up? That's where I'm going.
And
So-
that is this policy. That policy for how we handle all medications in the school is this policy. This just adds section K, medical marijuana, and then lists out the procedures for how we're going to
Right.
deal with that. We had, like I said before, we have had 3 people, and we think it's 3, it could be 2, because Beth and I overlapped a little
Yeah.
bit, who have requested medical marijuana use in the school. Once we laid out the procedures, and the procedures are exactly what we've laid out in here, they determined they really couldn't meet those, and that they would dispense or administer the
beforehand.
medication outside of school time,
Okay.
school hours.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Are the forms, because I'm looking in the statute and I'm just not seeing it, are the forms of the medication listed in statute?
Let me pull up the statute. I have it right here.
Or maybe a different one, a related one, not in not in 062.
Yeah. I think it's in statute, and I think I highlighted it. Trust me, we didn't stray too far from the statute language on any of this.
I like that you put number 3 in there, that if the federal government indicates that district federal funds are jeopardized by this policy.
And so that's the
That-
catch-all, so
yeah.
if the board decides to go ahead and enact this as part of that the Florida statute requires, that is the provision that will, in case we get, dear school board, you receive federal funds, you can't do this, that's the provision that would make that null and void.
Are we
Yeah, it
what
is.
some of the other districts are including?
Do we know of any school, I don't know if any school board has lost, like Colorado.
I haven't heard of any challenges to
Okay.
this, a school board enacting, this to be permitted on campus. I do know there are some school boards that are doing it on campus and some, Alachua, for instance, they can sign the child out, take them off campus.
To me, it's medicine, like, I have no qualm, I don't know, like, what's the big deal? Why is this a big deal? Help me understand.
It's federal.
I did just send you guys an email from my favorite pediatrician. Because I asked, what about this? And I know in the policy it says all these different forms, but he's under the impression that the main way that's being used right now are for typically people who have cancer or sickle cell, something that's extreme pain. The problem with that is, if it's that severe, they probably should not be in school. And if they're, with the kind of, the form that they would be using, they would pretty much have an altered mental state that we really wouldn't be sending them back to class. And so they probably need to go home until they, does that make sense? So and we've talked about, the seizure, that's going on, and we start using the procedure, that's a lower dose and that would not have that effect, but he seems to think that that scenario is far into
A
the
lower dose
future.
than what?
A lower dose
Lower
than
dose
what,
THC.
than what like a cancer patient or a sickle cell somebody might be using, that would be a vapor or a oral.
So if they were using a lower dose, they can just bring it with them? What do
No,
you
no,
mean?
no, no, I'm just saying, it wouldn't be a like if they came and took it,
I'm gonna
you would need to wait until they come
Math.
down off their high to send them back to class, is what I'm trying to say.
No, I don't understand what's going on.
For that's a lower dose that you would be taking, it would be,
Our
regular.
policy only addresses a certain
Small
dose?
concentration.
No. What Katie I think is trying, can I jump in here?
Yes, absolutely.
What Katie's trying to say is that in speaking with her pediatrician, he was concerned because typically medical marijuana is at the moment used for people in severe pain. So what dose, why is a student in our school system gonna be doing medical marijuana if they're not in severe pain?
I know quite a few kids.
And that's a reason why not to have it in the clinic, because if
Right.
you've got a kid
Right.
who you just gave this needed dose, they're not in a state that they probably, does that make sense? We want students walking in and they need a private.
Well, I want to
place.
clarify, we do have students with chronic illnesses who attend our schools. And we do have students who, have good days and bad days, and they come to school when they have good days and bad days. And if they have prescribed medication for their pain and for whatever other reason, and it is within the guidelines of a qualified patient and a registered caregiver, we would administer that in school per this policy. And so I don't wanna make anybody believe that all of these kids are sitting at home. We educate students who have chronic conditions and do deal with chronic pain. We were not recording as parents called up and said, I wanna give my child this. It was just so out of the blue that we were trying to develop policy and procedures around it, not policy at the time. So we weren't keeping track of, oh, well, why does your child need it? And quite frankly, they don't have to answer that question to us. So I can't say for sure that that scenario wouldn't happen. But if the child is a qualified patient and the mom, the registered caregiver has all of these pieces in place and be the sole person who administers that medication every day at the same time, then we would at least have some policy in place to support our administrators.
A lot of the things that, I'll be honest, a lot of the kids that we see are gonna be more of your supportive level, participatory level kids who have constant seizures, have a medical. That's where I'm gonna feel like we're gonna see a lot of these medication. If you ever get to Google Zoe's policy, this was the case of Volusia, and it was a girl who was in the school, lots of seizures. The parent felt like a dosage of medical marijuana helped with her seizures. They're the ones really brought up to the state of Florida because news were involved, the board didn't know what to do with it, and became a big media thing. There's a story and a video about her and how it all came about. After Volusia went through that, everybody started going, we need to go and look at this, because we keep thinking of the kids that may abuse it, but there's a lot more kids that may end up benefiting from this. We just have to weed out the ones who are gonna abuse it.
Nope.
I mean, that's, yeah.
Weed out.
But I think it depends how strong our procedures are. It's something new, something different. I know the administrators or our committee were split. Half were okay with it, half were like, what do you mean I have to allow this on my campus? What do you mean I have to find a location? And who's gonna verify that the parent has the right card? And who's gonna I mean, they were like, oh my God. So I don't know, once we develop a policy, once we build it, they will come, how many of these cases, because we really haven't gone through it. But my fear from my point is every school district pretty much around is starting to have one. They move into Brevard and we have nothing, and they're used to, well, Osceola has had one, and now we move here, what do I do? That's just the way I'm looking at it, because I've had IEPs from Broward, which they shouldn't do, but they did put on the IEP a medical marijuana, and we had to come back and take that out, but we can't have that on the IEP. But they did, because they were allowing it at school, so they just put it as one of the services the child was getting, even though they weren't providing it. So I think it's a matter of time. Are people gonna be open to it? I can see both sides of the.
Well, I also had a phone conversation with the same pediatrician, and there are students who absolutely, this is, medically necessary like some other things, but it's coming, whatever level it's here, it's coming, and I think there's several places in this policy where you wrote in, emphasize, do this at home if at all possible, if there, get it, because it would be a disruption, from their students' day, possibly to other students if it's not if we can't find a private place, but, go back, help me if I'm missing it, my last concern is make sure we have in there somewhere, cause so my pediatrician, the other thing he talked about with me on the phone is, do we have someone who's going to observe the administration of it to make sure there's no abuse by the person who's administering?
We, the committee said that no, we would not put any of our employees
Okay.
in the clearance work, because, and again, on our form, it does say something that if we feel that they're violating or not following what they're supposed to be following, then we can revoke the privilege to use
Okay.
it on school campus.
Okay, so if we feel like they're coming on our campus and using it themselves, then
Yes.
then you're done.
I'm gonna have to get back to you on the I don't remember, I think it was Cheryl who asked, is permissible forms in statute language? I'm not finding it in statute. We probably pulled it from somebody else's policy, but we
I
would
was looking
just.
at what you pulled is exactly what Colorado Springs had.
Okay.
I just wanna know because
Yeah,
they
I'll
had
get
marijuana
back
there
to you
for
on
a
that
lot longer.
answer.
So I was just curious. Yeah, because you don't necessarily wanna.
We didn't pull it from nowhere is what I'm telling you, so there's I'll find out where we got it from.
This is a tough one. I almost think that we need some kind of policy, but it also, I'd like a policy that gives us the back door out if somebody is, I don't want the feds taking away our money.
Well, this does, if you look down to
And
number.
I saw that number,
Yeah.
and you put in, I appreciate that. But I know that many students, well, not many, but some of the students I work with, were autistic and with the seizures, and it did help them. And these were younger kids, we're not talking high school kids, these were younger kids. So, and of course, the parent was administrating, and I really agree that I don't really want our staff to have to do any of this at all.
Yeah.
This is just a no-brainer for me. I have no issues whatsoever. I think I know 3 children on it right now, one for seizures, one for another issue. It's helping them tremendously. To me, it's like no other medication. I mean, if it's a little more complicated, the parent has to come, it's the parent's right. And if the parent's over-drugging them, is that really our problem? Who's to say they're not gonna over-drug them with Ritalin or something? Like, that's their response, it's their child. They want to come on campus to administer something to keep them healthy and strong and be able to get through school. I have no issues.
I feel the same way. I mean, the fear of the federal government coming in to a school district to remove funding because they followed a state law becomes a fight between the federal government and the state law. So to say that we would lose funding over that whole battle is a far stretch. I believe that we need to, as many times as possible, and you know this, Amy, I always want to try to follow the statutory laws as much as possible to the letter. And I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't follow what the statutes are. And I agree, like, this is a controlled substance just the same as any others. It's shown benefits in some areas, and I think that we need to allow them under a current structure. And I truly believe that we do ourselves a disservice by not having some kind of form and structure set in place for our employees and everybody else. So that's why I think that the policy is a good thing too.
So to clear, fine to move ahead with, are you okay with it? Cause you gave us 2 choices, administer it
Well, the first
Well,
at a location.
Yeah, the
or-
first is yes, go forward with the policy, or no, we don't want that. So.
Okay, so we've got 2 that would like a policy. Charlie would like a policy?
Yeah, we need a policy.
Okay, 3 for a policy.
I think we have to have something in place because if we don't, then I feel like we're putting our team members in a horrible situation.
Yeah.
And that's not fair to them.
Ms. Campbell? Okay, so everybody wants a policy.
And then the only other question was on K, number 2, and it's the designated location. And it's whether or not we allow this to be administered on school grounds in a location designated by the principal but administered by the registered caregiver, or if we want the child checked out, removed from school grounds before the medication is administered and then checked back in afterward.
I will go. I think it should just be in wherever the principal says. I like that you said it can't be like at sporting events.
Can't be
you
on a
know,
bus.
like-
Can't be on a bus.
Yeah, not on a bus, not those random places. I mean, in most schools, it'll probably be the clinic. Some of this is just drops. The parent walks in just like they give them an Advil or drop it over their tongue and hit the road. I think that's a lot less disruptive than checking out and finding someone to scan in and check out. So I think designated space for me. Anybody else?
I think designated space is good, but I have one concern with limiting it from, and maybe it's not a concern, maybe it's just something to talk through with you all who have worked the issue. I get why we would not want to have it administered on a school bus, but at a school-sponsored event, so I'm thinking you have a child that needs medical marijuana throughout the day, they're going on the St. Augustine field trip or the SeaWorld field trip where they're literally leaving before school starts and they're not coming back until after school gets out. And are we excluding them from participation with their peers by limiting it? Do you see where I'm going with that? Like, and I don't know what the right answer is, but at the same time,
If mom's got it in her purse, what's that mean? I mean, mom can carry CBD oil in her purse at Walmart or anywhere else.
If mom is willing to attend, and then we.
Right.
If mom is the registered caregiver, mom would have to attend the field trip.
So it'd be the designated space would now be in front of the Flagler
Custodial
College.
And
We could,
And
Like, what is the,
And she'd be transporting it on a school bus if it was a school bus activity. They would have to drive themselves, so it's not on the school bus.
Which we have a policy against that.
we drove
Yeah,
ourselves
right.
the 4th grade field trip to St. Augustine, we drove ourselves. We
Like
did,
I would
in
have
my
to
own
check in.
car.
Like if a parent goes separately, like when we've gone to Disney and things like that, you know, there's like you can't meet up with us. Like if they weren't chaperones, they were just saying you can't join up with the group once you get there. That's a big no-no.
So was I violating school board policy when I drove separate? There was no room on the bus.
I'm not the
No, you-
I'm not
well,
the
you
field
were a
trip
chaperone.
expert.
Oh,
I don't know.
Am I right?
Chaperone.
Am I right?
Chaperone.
You were a chaperone, that's okay, if you were a
Yeah.
chaperone, but what Katie's saying,
Right.
it was somebody who was just a parent who wasn't a
Yeah.
chaperone wanted to go.
Oh, yeah, that's different. No, I had a group of kids assigned to me when I got there. I was a
Yeah.
What happens in the event that the other controlled substances that we need to give to the kids that are on these field trips? What do we do?
The
with those?
chaperones go to the clinic. They check out the drug, whatever the medication is that the child needs during the day. They take it on the field trip. They are the designated administrators of that. They have to have had training to do that. They have a brief training from the nurse. And then they check back whatever is not used at the end of the day to the clinic. So, for example, if a child needs an EpiPen,
Right.
not an EpiPen, that's a poor
Then
example.
we had an incident where some
Insulin,
of these
right,
numbers
yeah,
were off after us. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I got you.
So the designated parent person would have to be on that field trip.
The registered caregiver is the only one
Registered
that's,
caregiver,
is
yes.
allowed to administer the medical marijuana, so they would have to be part of that field trip, but we need to sit down and figure out all the intricacies
And there
of
could be
that.
other school sponsors, I'm trying to think of other school sponsored
Well,
events. But
yes.
I think you can add a qualifier to the end of 5 that said unless prior approval has been provided by, I don't know.
But does,
Chris Moore.
Where are you in
Does
that?
let me ask
Not
you
putting names
this.
in policies anymore.
When we write a policy or we act, all of our policies and procedures are not only just for our schools, but upon other events and outside things, right? So,
Correct.
so technically, if we are writing a policy that allows an individual to come on as a caregiver to a specific spot, already predefined, if they were to do the same thing on a field trip, already predefined with the principle that they can work out, we wouldn't need to rewrite a policy because it's already written into our policy. Does that make sense to you? So basically, by saying that we are doing it already to a specific spot, all they would have to do is if they were going to Orlando, if they were going somewhere, they have to predetermine a specific spot. I mean, I think that would also help with the loops, that instead of going down an avenue where we go through 1,000 different policies and redefine,
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
what-ifs.
it might be a,
Yeah.
it might be a way to circumnavigate that.
Yeah,
I would, and if we gave direction from the board as, intent of being that, then when it comes up, you could always refer back to the intent of the board.
Number 5 says it shall not be administered while aboard a bus.
We could stop it there.
Shall not be administered on the bus.
Except that if you go to the zoo or to St. Augustine, could the designated location be back on the bus in privacy of the caregiver and the student?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
I mean.
No, because it shall not be on the bus.
Yeah, but-
Stand behind the bus.
I mean, I think it's just that, I think the is the bus actually
Well,
a
that's school board property.
predefined, wouldn't they have to already get the permission of the principal prior to using the bus as a signified thing? So if they don't get the permission of the principal prior to using the bus, then the bus can't be issued. You could just get rid of the bus.
yeah, I understand where you're going, and I agree that maybe the language is all right here. Do we have to, we don't have to write the intent of the board into
No.
the.
Ms.
okay.
You're gonna throw a wrench into it, be quiet
Ms.
back
Klein
there.
has her
Ms.
hand.
Klein has a.
We were rolling this car.
Typically,
out.
elementary field trips, where they park the bus and where the students are usually very far
That
away
is a
from
true
each
story.
other.
Yeah.
So
The
I
bus
don't think
leaves,
we
right,
need to
come back
say
6 hours
that
later.
that would be the location.
Right,
I think the parent, the caregiver makes that determination.
with the
and
principal.
We're going to the zoo, we're gonna
Go in the
go to the restroom, wherever.
The monkey exhibit, wherever it is,
Yeah, I don't think we have to do that.
right?
So should we stop?
Rhino
5,
exhibit.
Take off or add a school sponsored event, and that'll take care of it, right? I'm sorry?
We're at number 5, H, K5, H5. No, just 5.
Sorry. K.
Some policies are fun.
K5.
Are you sure? Cause it
K5.
looks like
K,
K5.
K5.
K5, sorry.
Yes, K5.
Not K2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's
Just stop it
let's
at
just
bus.
stop it at bus.
Is that
And
okay
then,
with-
and then the rest of the policy falls into place, that it is in a location agreed upon by the
Right.
registered caregiver and the principal.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes
Okay.
good sense, yeah.
Good?
Yep.
Okay.
Is that it?
Everybody good?
Do you all want to look at the administrative procedures for on-campus administration, or have you looked at those already? Are you okay with those?
What's that?
Just down below,
Oh, yeah.
it
Comfortable
says
language
doing it
Yep.
on campus or
Yeah.
afterly.
It's gonna stay just like that. The only thing that was altered was, number 5, you took off that last part.
It
And we're
does
gonna-
say it has to, it cannot create risk of exposure to other students.
Right.
That's good, yeah, that's why I was asking about the
somebody bought some essential oil that, you know, go rub this on my head, you know.
And then the only information I have to get back to you right now is the basis by which we said these are the permissible forms.
Okay, Mr. Susan, you wanted to say one last thing on this before we
Yeah, I
move
just,
on?
one of the issues, no problem with under controlled substances and everything else. Just as a point of order, I would really love to see if there's a way that we could work with our local municipalities in getting a ordinance or something passed to keep a lot of the CBD oils and all the other stuff at least to 500 to 1,000 feet from sale from our schools. This is entirely a different topic, but it is on the same. I really am upset. You drive by Kennedy and there's a guy with a marijuana leaf out in front and he's selling right around the corner. There's shops that are at O'Galley that are right on the corner where the kids fly by, and it's killing us with the other stuff that we're dealing with the vaping. But I think that's part of where we need to go with some of these policies is can we work with our municipalities on establishing an ordinance or something and not sell some of the stuff within 500 to 1,000 feet, because they're basically setting up shop and kids are falling through it, and it's not fair to our kids.
I think we need to expand it and make all restrictions regarding,
Around our school.
Legislative
regarding proximity to schools, the 2-mile walking zone. Because no, I'm
You're
serious,
right, yeah.
because it's just like, we
Yeah.
have pedophiles who live within 2 miles of our schools, they're outside 1,000 feet, we can't transport kids, so kids are walking past them.
Believe me, I would love to create that. I've just never seen it in state or county municipal law past 1,000 feet, so.
Go big or
believe me.
go home, Susan.
Hey, look. You got my motto right there. I mean, we would, with 82 schools, we would create a heck of a thing. I'm in favor.
That's
I'm
a
just
lot
saying
of
some
land area.
kind of
Like,
an
where could
extension.
they, with 2 miles,
Hey,
Where
any
do they
direction
sell
from
CBD?
us?
So you're telling me
The
if we
cow
had shops in the
pasture
county,
right
I love
there?
it.
Is there any place for them, is what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like if you drew a map of all of our schools and went 2 miles every direction, does that cover our whole, like?
I'm sure we would face major
Yes.
pushback from
Why-
the companies that are
You'll have one in
manufacturing
Micco.
all of
Yeah.
You mean
Yeah,
to tell me
with
you
acid.
want to sell to our kids? Let me have that discussion. You want to have this policy? Let's have that discussion with those convenience stores. Sorry.
So, Chris, I was
Or
looking at
hold
this.
them accountable when they do break it and they sold it to them. That's another thing. Why don't we hold them accountable? So a kid gets caught with a vape stick at O'Galley High School, I bought it at the convenience store on the corner. Now those people are held accountable for selling to that kid. Sorry, I got a little fired up.
So, back to marijuana. Permissible forms of cannabinoid products means non-inhalable smoke or vapor products such as oils, tinctures, edible products, or lotions that can be administered and fully ingested or absorbed in a short period of time that are not otherwise intended for recreational use. Patches or other forms of administration that continue to deliver cannabinoid products to a student while at school are not permitted. So this is right out of District 11, Colorado Springs. And they've been doing this for a while. Just an
What's wrong with a
FYI.
patch?
A short patch, but not a patch that does it all over the whole day.
Yeah.
That's
Cause
what
I
I'm
can
saying.
take it off and give it to you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Right.
my deviant teenage brain.
I was gonna say, I see the way you think, and I see the way you think.
Just saying.
Just give me a little halo.
She could not be lying more at this moment.
Okay, are you good with?
I'm good with
where-
that.
You need anything else from us?
I don't think so, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. We will now move on to policy 5540, the schools and community agencies, which is also facilitated
I know,
by Ms. Ford.
I'm worn out.
And you're just getting started with this one.
This policy is being revised to clarify the procedures regarding requests by outside agencies to interview students and/or conduct investigations. The proposed revisions also make changes to terminology, formatting, and other changes in compliance with applicable Florida law. Particular areas of revision include the following: name change to the schools and investigations involving students, clarifying procedures on how to handle requests to interview students from outside agencies. Creation of a new Form 5540 F1, notice to not contact parent legal guardians regarding official investigation. Creation of administrative procedures 5540, quick reference chart for visits and requests to interview students or requests for records. And these proposed revisions encompass the suggested language from Neola. So, a little bit of background there. Part of the reason why we started down this path was that we had, number one, a reach out to us from DCF. Different schools were handling it differently when they came in to do investigations. Principals were doing what they thought needed to be done. DCF was doing what they thought needed to be done, and it was resulting in some conflict. Additionally, there was some conflict involved with police officers coming on campuses and how they handled their business. So with us and how the school interacted with them in exchange. So this policy was put in place, it was already in place, but our language wasn't very extensive and it didn't really give our administrators direction. And so this is a much more specific policy, and I'd like to walk you through it mostly because even today in cabinet we changed some of the language. We were reviewing it again, going what really makes sense here, because there's a lot going on here. And we want, the intent of this language is to both protect our students as well as give our principals and administrators some direction so that they know how to handle these things when they come to the school. If we start on just A, you'll see that A, B, C, D at the top is all stricken language. It's gone. Language from the previous policy. So
Can I
that
ask
was
you a question before you get started?
Sure.
Is this just like DCF type? It says law enforcement, but does
Bless
this
you.
cover investigations of bomb threats, kids of doing that nature? This is
Let me rephrase. I started to say no, but it could. If the police were investigating a bomb threat at Titusville High School and the suspect was at Astronaut High School, the police would go there to investigate that or interview that student there. So it could. It's any time a police officer comes in, DCF or police investigate an allegation of abuse or neglect. Anytime the police come in to investigate a witness or a victim to a crime, and anytime the police come in to investigate the alleged perpetrator of a crime.
okay. So anything. So kid threatens to
On
shoot
or
up
off
school.
campus?
On or off, well,
Well, on would
Sort
be
of.
our SRO, but
yeah.
these are
Does
typically
this cover
community.
how our SROs do the investigate? What I'm trying to
No.
get at is my focused in when you said parents will be notified before unless DCF is notified first, or you're going to tell DCF first before you notify the parent. What's coming to my mind is after Parkland, all the craziness we had going on with all the threats, and we would investigate and sometimes interview children before we let the parents knew we were doing that.
And we still
sometimes,
do.
So we're not going to let parents know. This is continuing that.
Well, it's in this language, and it talks about we ask the police, can we notify the parent that you are here? So as we walk through the language of this, you'll see where the principal has the onus to say, can we contact the parents, and the police have to document, I told him not to because of these reasons,
Okay.
or I said it was okay.
Is that cover our SROs also?
There are many scenarios. Oftentimes when an SRO is involved in an investigation at a school level, they are investigating it alongside the administration. And I need to think through all of the different cases of what you just said.
There was a specific incident last year that's coming to mind in an elementary school where we now had an SRO, where we hadn't had one before. A child did something stupid. A group of 10 kids actually did something stupid together, and the SRO held the kids for a couple hours interviewing them without the parents being notified first. And so is that something that we want to stand by and continue doing, or do we think parents should be notified, especially in elementary school when they're sitting there with a police officer in a classroom for
Yeah.
2+ hours?
So this is the way it reads. Before each student is questioned as a suspect or in an alleged violation of the law, the principal or designee shall attempt to contact the parent or legal guardian prior to questioning and shall remain in the room during questioning unless compelling reasons for exclusion are provided by the law enforcement agency.
Including our SRO. Is that
Including
what I
our-
want to know is that this is clearly covering outside agencies, but our SRO technically isn't out. They're employed by the sheriff, but they're in our school. Does this cover how they're going to react in the same situation?
We didn't specifically say that, but that would be my understanding of the way we wrote it. Do you think that needs to be clarified, Amy?
It might need to be. Do you wanna go through the language first and see if that addresses your concerns? I don't think that's not specifically, the policy does not, as drafted now, does not specifically speak to our SROs conducting an internal investigation. Is that?
That's what I'm asking.
That's what
Yeah,
you're asking. And
yeah, but
to
it
me,
does-
this was outside law enforcement agencies coming in, and we were using our SRO as a designee or whatever to facilitate that investigation. So maybe if we might need to tweak the language if that's
We
the
might.
case, to just say outside law enforcement
Because
agencies.
that does
or
happen often. So
That's
yeah.
not an internal investigation.
Yeah.
You wanna look at the language and we'll see
Yeah,
where
let's-
that.
Oh wait, it says including school resource officers. Hold
Well,
on.
that
That's
is,
the stricken one? Or is it the new one?
No, that's the
this
clean
is the
version.
new language.
That's what it would
So
look
here's
like.
the things that we added just so that you can follow along. In A,
Okay.
school board recognizes that all employees and agents of the board have an affirmative duty to cooperate with law enforcement and DCF. Going down to the second sentence, as provided herein, the principal or designee, including school resource officers, so the SROs can act as the principal's designee, may also assist authorities in their investigations or other violations of law in which students are alleged to be involved. So the intent of that is when a municipality comes into our schools and are doing an investigation, typically our practice now is they talk to our SROs in our building if there is an SRO and explain why they're there and explain they want to interview the children and what they want to interview the children about. And so we wanted to make sure that our administrators knew the SRO can still act as their designee in this process. So that was one addition from what you saw earlier. So B, and this is a decision point that I wanted to bring to your attention. When state and federal law enforcement authorities or officials from DCF arrive at the school and wish to interview a student or investigate an alleged violation of law, they must contact the principal, ... In Neola language, it gives you the option to add ICE. So it gives you the option to add in the language specifically including the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. In this policy, we didn't add it. We did some research and there's some current language out there.
Isn't ICE part of federal law enforcement?
Yeah, I'll just tell you what Neola said. They separated it out and gave you the option of adding it in, and probably due to,
Political pressure.
so. I'll just say as we did not add it because we had this information. Federal law guarantees all school-age children the right to an education, and there is no law requiring ICE officials to enter schools. They put out a memo that stated that both Customs and Border Patrol and Immigration and Customs Enforcement issued a policy memo in 2011 that directs agents not to engage in enforcement activities in sensitive locations unless there are exigent circumstances or prior supervisory approval. So we left that out and wanted to leave it to you guys to decide if you wanted it specifically put in.
I'm good without it too.
Yeah, and because we also have somewhere in here, I can't remember which letter it was on, that if you can conduct this investigation outside of
Outside
school
of
hours,
school,
do it.
Do it, yeah.
And, you know, obviously if it needs to be
Yeah.
handled quickly or it's related to, you know,
Health, safety, welfare.
parents, you know, right, yeah.
So B also makes reference to the quick reference chart for visits and requests to interview students and requests. That was revised today in cabinet. We just struck some language and we also added some clarifying language.
So in the last page of your packet there, it's a quick reference chart. It's for those people like me who are visual learners that says when guardian items come online, what we do, when DCF comes, what do we do, when law enforcement officers come, what do we do, and so this mirrors the language that's already in the policy.
That's how I like
So
to
I
stuff
noticed
too.
we got an email this afternoon that said there was a change, so what was the change on the chart?
The change on the chart was just that. We added, so if you look at the DCF, look at the 5th bullet down. In the event DCF removes a child from campus, DCF is responsible for notifying the parent, legal guardian, principal or designee shall notify the superintendent or designee through the incident reporting process. We added that for DCF and also for law enforcement officers, so that last bullet. We took out, there was a bullet in there that said, I'm gonna flip through my written changes. There was a bullet in there that did say.
How can we tell DCF or law enforcement that it's coming from the outside that you better
We
let
don't
the
tell them,
parent
but-
know?
so-
I mean, that's like,
When we
they
met
have
with
no authority
DCF
over
and
them.
law enforcement, we'd actually had, it was a pretty full room that we had
Yeah.
that we confirmed with them. So when you're taking a student off of campus, you're gonna notify, correct? And they said yes. So we're not,
And
our
if
policy
they
isn't really telling them,
don't-
but it's reminding.
It's on them, but you know who's gonna get yelled at.
Yeah, but we just give them their hotline.
And when we get to the form that they fill out, we'll talk a little bit more about when we start talking about it's on them. You'll see a little bit of what we asked for in the form. The other thing we added is at the very bottom, you added a note. Yep, the last bullet. The designee includes the school resource officer, SRO. So when it says principal or designee, so that way it comports with our current practices where the SRO is typically involved in communicating with that outside law enforcement agency and or DCF. So I just wanted to make sure you saw that we did do some revisions on this form. So going back to the policy itself, C starts talking about investigations by DCF. And again, we sat down with DCF and had a couple of long conversations with them about this. The first one is just that we have a mandatory obligation to report. The second one is, you're gonna see this as a theme running through this, and that is that if neither the student nor a member of his or her family is subject to this investigation, the investigator shall be encouraged to contact the student during non-school hours and investigate the matter off school property if at all possible. And I will tell you, our principals have all had the opportunity to say, can't you do this someplace else? So that language is actually written into each of the different separate areas. Number 3 contains some language that was changed. It has been changed to shall attempt. The principal or designee shall attempt to contact the parent and legal guardian prior to the investigator questioning a child unless directed to not to do so by the investigator. That was put in there because oftentimes every single number that we have on our contact screens are incorrect. And if we're holding up an investigator as we are cycling through all of the numbers, we need to make a solid effort to get in touch with the parents unless directed otherwise, and then allow the DCF to move on with their work.
Do we have a policy that covers how our SROs handle it since you're not counting them in here as external?
Well, we're gonna have to clarify that in here. This would be the place to do it. So
Okay.
I have a note. We're gonna cycle back around to that.
Okay.
And that's why we
Alright.
have these work sessions, because it's really good for the board to provide direction to staff
Yeah.
on what you're looking for, so that we can come back. When we come back at Rule Development Workshop, we'll have incorporated
It'll be
everything
set.
that you've asked for into that final
In that
revision.
instance though, isn't the SRO working as the principal's designee, and don't we have policy indicating that principals are to contact parents?
This is the policy that would mandate what the principal does or doesn't do during an investigation.
But if the SRO is doing an internal investigation, which is what Ms. Deskovich was asking about, in that instance, are they acting as law enforcement or are they acting as principal designee if it's an internal investigation? If it's an internal investigation and they're acting as principal designee, we have policy that tells principals when they should be contacting parents, right?
We do, but it would flip quickly to law enforcement if an arrest was made. So if in the course of their investigation, they determine that a student committed a crime, they would then arrest. At that point, they're not principal designee, they are a law enforcement officer. So I think that the questions are good, and we just need to figure out how to clarify exactly what you want to be the SRO's role in all of this, so that we don't leave anything open to interpretation.
Even if there's just a place in there that refers to our other policy, you know, in the event at that fill in blank, you know,
Right,
go here.
Can I add something? Sorry.
Sure.
And Ms. Enval could probably help clarify. One of the things that we fleshed out in the last 2 years with our SRO are those joint investigations that are internal, because there is a point at which a Miranda process is appropriate. And so where some districts have gotten in trouble is in a lot of cases, an SRO is treated like school staff. For example, reasonable suspicion, you get the same criteria as school staff. But it veers into the child being guilty of a crime. And so there's been training and clarification with the school resource officers and school administrators on how important it is to know when to separate those, because the child has inherent rights via Miranda, via contacting a parent when they are veering into being a suspect of crime. And so, although it wasn't, I don't think, the original intent of this policy, it has been a significant topic of discussion, collaboration between administration and school resource officers as we added such a large influx, particularly in places that weren't in that rhythm of working with a school, to add some additional training on making sure that we are protecting students' rights in terms of talking to a police officer, and when they have to sort of throw up a Miranda flag, get the parent involved and let them know. So, although not represented there, we have collaborated on clarification around that as case law has come through, especially with the influx of SROs in our schools. So I don't know if that helps.
It's also reflected in our MOUs with our law enforcement agencies that we cannot interfere with law enforcement meeting their obligation to law enforcement related situations even on campus.
But we can't give them extra access to a child either who's otherwise protected in an investigation.
That's what I'm more concerned about, because
I
with
am
this.
vigilant at
Right.
watching for that.
Well, and I think we're at risk with the little kids, because 6th grade, 5th grade, they're now just getting to the age where they may say something stupid that could be illegal, or, switch from a group of kids on the playground interviewing to, oh no, you've actually threatened
Yeah,
something.
what I can
You know,
say
it's-
is, we've had extensive conversations with Major Walters. He is absolutely on the same page, and he has, through his training with SROs, been really deliberate about that conversation. It's probably in writing somewhere. I can't speak to that, but I can say we have had extensive conversations around it and around when to protect the students' rights to not incriminate themselves without appropriate rights.
I think before we go into the next section, and we're gonna circle back around to the SRO and try to figure out how this language is gonna look. But if we could go down to the form, the 5540 F1 form, not knowing what the form looks like or what it addresses, it's gonna help you to see this form before we go into the next section. So this is the form that's gonna be filled out every time a law enforcement officer or DCF says,
Ah.
no, you are not allowed to talk to a parent, or you're not allowed to be in the room. So as you read down, it talks about the name of the school, it talks about who it is and what agency they fulfill. It talks about what administrator or designee they were talking to and what their title is, and it states this person of the above named school is to not contact the parent or legal guardian of the student listed below regarding the investigation because. So they're going to have to write out why you are not allowed to contact the parent. I have further directed them to not inform the parent or legal guardian of the investigation or any actions taken while the students are subject to the control or in the care of BPS. It requires their signature, it requires their phone number, it requires their badge and ID and their agency and their supervisor's number. One of the questions that came up today was, what if they refuse to give it to you? Again, we've worked in cooperation with DCF and our district security as it relates to our municipalities. If there's any pushback on that, they just need to contact us and we'll contact the supervisors at DCF to get that information. We added this line, this form shall be maintained in the student discipline file. And I believe we still need to add the line of how long they need to keep that,
Well, the retention periods for the discipline file
would control that, okay.
So I don't know if we need to put a retention period.
So just to have that in mind as we go over the next section. So if we could go back to 4.
Yes. Yeah.
I have much question on 4.
Okay.
Which letter do we have? C.
So 4 is still pertaining to DCF. We're still in the DCF investigation. I can't, yes, yes. The principal or designee may request to be in the room during the questioning of a student. However, it is up to the investigator whether or not, whether to allow the school staff member who is known by the child to be present during the interview, and will only make allowances if the investigator believes the school staff member could enhance the success of the interview by his presence, or the child requests or consents to the presence of the school staff member for the interview. So at this time, we have already asked DCF, can we call the parent? DCF has said no or yes, and we've documented on that form. And then we asked DCF, may we be in the room with you while you're interviewing the student? And again, DCF has the authority to say no or yes based on whether or not they think it will hold merit during the interview.
So when I read this, we say the principal or designee may request to remain in the room. And I have a little bit of question about what kind of a pickle we might be putting our principal in by asking them to be in the room with the DCF investigator who may be investigating all kinds of strange abuse situations, right? But my confusion with it is, then it goes on and it says, however, it is up to the investigator whether to allow a school staff member. So are we saying a different school staff member, like maybe the child's teacher, or because the principal is a staff member, but this almost sounds like we're talking about someone other than the principal that may be allowed to, like I could see if, you know, say they show up to school to, yeah, counselor, social worker, favorite teacher.
Yeah, and that's the designee part, because the principal could say, I don't have a close relationship as, you know, the third grade teacher or the counselor or the social worker that's in the school. That's probably the person that knows the most about the family and the student. Would that person be allowed to sit in on the interview? And then the DCF worker would be able to say yay or nay. So that's the designee in this particular situation.
Let's just repeat that phrase, then, principal or designee instead of staff
School
member,
staff
and that
member,
ends the
right.
confusion.
Okay. Perfect. Does that work?
Mr. Novelli, it's the first thing you've said. Hi.
Listen, when it's important, he's there.
Yeah, do we have any perspective on, I just worry about what situation we're putting our teachers and staff in to bring them into a meeting. I mean, I can see social workers and guidance counselors maybe, but a teacher who doesn't have any,
Doesn't it say request?
I don't know.
It's
They
not like
may.
they
They
must or
request.
they have to.
They may.
I
And
think-
that language was changed. It was shall request, and now it's may request, and I can tell you where that comes from. Now, keeping in mind this is Neola language, I can tell you where this comes from, is the fact that the two agencies work together. And there's oftentimes the school is dealing with a student that we don't know has a significant issue at home, that when DCF comes in to do the investigation, it helps us provide better services for the student. Vice versa, sometimes the DCF comes in to investigate something that maybe they don't have a lot of information on, and they might not be connecting the dots or have knowledge of the things that school officials know. And so with the opportunity to sit in on the interview, if it's allowed, and if the principal decides that they really want to sit in for that kid because they know that kid has more issues than maybe anybody knows about, it gives us an opportunity for information sharing between the two agencies to better support the kids and the family. I don't, and our conversation was really good today. Jane made some excellent points and Stephanie made some excellent points. We have DCF in and out of schools all the time, and principals or their designee don't need to be involved in all of them. But there's certainly going to be some cases where the principal says, that one I want to participate in, or I want my social worker to participate in.
I think we also have the fine line of, when we're reporting, oftentimes we're reporting on our own employees. And we have to make sure that our principals or designees don't push to be in on that investigation. So.
That'd be a problem.
That would be a problem, so.
Which would be a reason why DCF might deny the.
Sure, but we have to make sure that we stay equal on all of them, because I could see, as a principal, I wouldn't want to be in those investigations. If you have something you need to tell me, you'll need to come and talk to me afterwards, but I wouldn't personally want to be in that. You also have students with disabilities. When you ask them a question, depending how you ask them the question, you're gonna get a specific answer.
Right.
So when we had a situation where the parents were upset because it was the way the DCF person asked the question, it's the answer that they got. If they would have asked it a different way, DCF didn't know that this is a child with disability, you have to be free, you would have gotten a different answer.
Right.
So we have those cases also where they just will repeat what they just told you, right back to you, and then they think, okay, that's what
That's
happened.
the answer, yeah. So those are our DCF investigations. Are we, so far I have written down that 4B, we're gonna change the language from school staff to principal or designee.
And 4A and 4 itself, there's 3
Yes.
places on there.
Okay,
Yes,
so
I got it.
everywhere that said, we're gonna change it throughout the whole policy. I don't know if we need clarifying language about, not attending if it's a report on our own employees.
Isn't that in there somewhere? Maybe not.
Well, I don't think the when we're at, if there was a request, the request probably would be denied.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
One
Well,
would
maybe
assume,
not. I don't
one would
know.
assume, again, we may come back to you and that may be added. We'll have a conversation outside of this. The next section is about when law enforcement is investigating child abuse, abuse and neglect. It pretty much mirrors the first one. The law enforcement agency may interview a student that's on school property. However, if the family is the subject, if neither the student nor the family member is the subject of the child abuse neglect investigation, such agency shall be encouraged to contact the student during non-school hours. We want to keep repeating that. Again, number 2, the principal or designee shall attempt to contact the parent or legal guardian prior to law enforcement agencies questioning the student unless directed otherwise, to do so by the agency investigator. And if they deny that the administrator or designee to contact the parents, we're going to document it on the form. We good with D? E, we start getting into violations of law. So we are talking about law enforcement officers and the violation of law. The first one talks about that, kind of what you were talking about, Ms. Deskovich, when, if it is a violation of law that happened on school, an investigation can take place immediately on school property during school hours at the request of the principal or designee if that violation took place on school property. So that's addressed in there, but we may need to look at that language in light of some of the conversation we've just had. So here is where we get into the language of law enforcement officers and what an admin responsibility is. If a student is to be questioned as a witness or victim of an alleged violation, so not perpetrator but witness or victim, the principal or designee shall remain, and this could be the SRO, that's why we clarified this at the top, in the room during the questioning unless compelling reasons for exclusion are provided by the law enforcement agency. In those circumstances, the principal or designee will be lawfully acting in loco parentis. The principal or designee shall attempt to contact the parent or legal guardian subsequent to the questioning or interview. In the event that the law enforcement agency directs the principal or designee not, we shall document it.
This needs to cover our SROs also, not as the designee, but as the law
Enforcement agent. We're gonna work on that language and bring it back. I can see where there needs to be clarifying language in there. Number 3 is similar language, but now the child is a suspect in an alleged violation. Before each student is questioned as a suspect in an alleged violation, the principal or designee, including the SRO, shall attempt to contact the parent or legal guardian prior to the questioning and shall remain in the room during questioning unless compelling reasons for exclusion are provided by the law enforcement agency. And again, if that's denied, we're going to document that on the notice to not contact parent form.
So just clarifying, if they're the suspect, they will notify the parents before. If they're the witness or a victim, it's after.
An attempt will be made to notify the parent before. We can't
On
number 3.
okay, but on number 2 it's different.
That is correct. It's subsequent to the to the questioning or interview. Concerns?
No, I'm just wondering what the thoughts are on that. I don't necessarily have a concern. Why the difference? Why would we wait?
Number 3 revolves around student rights and
It's not usually, I don't think it would necessarily be an issue.
okay.
But
It kind of is, if you're a victim, my first thought is I wanna know if my kid's a victim first before anything, but when you really think about it, you
Other
don't
parents,
know if
they
the
might
kid's a
not
victim
tell
until
you.
you've asked a few questions.
Right.
And so you don't wanna call the parent and say, oh my gosh, your kid's a victim, and then go, oh, not really,
Just
we asked
kidding.
him and now he's not. So you
Yeah.
kinda have to,
A significant amount of times in these kinds of cases, they call the parents ahead of time. And so typically when they come in, the first question you're gonna ask them, does the parent know? And then you try to get on the same page with them right away, and having been involved in a lot of them, the majority of the time, they've already talked to the parent, and the parent knows that they're coming to respond. Not always, but a significant amount of time.
Number 4 is about notification and FERPA, the release of records. Number 1, we really want to get
wait,
every.
number 4, I don't have a 4.
Oh, F. Number F.
F is for 4.
Sorry. Document the release of records. Number 1 just says, administrators, you need to document every attempt you make to call a parent during any of these situations. Number 2 addresses that it really is the law enforcement agency or DCF who need to notify the parent in the event that they remove the students from a school, and it is the parent's responsibility to notify the school district through the incident reporting process. And finally, the last one is just a reminder about FERPA. No school official may release personally identifying information containing the student's educational records to DCF or the law enforcement without a lawfully issued subpoena.
Anybody have any more questions or comments for Ms. Moore? Mr. Novelli,
Yes, ma'am.
you're up.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Oh, no, you're not.
Have we ever looked at the length of investigations for both law enforcement and our, it just seems like sometimes these investigations take forward. Is there any way that we've ever looked at possibly asking them to move them up on the tier of it? Have we ever done anything like that, Dr. Lawrence?
Are you speaking to student investigations or employee?
Both employee and student, and the reason is that we have people that are out of work, we have, you know what I mean, there's time sensitive stuff, we're losing people, substitutes, the cost gets higher.
Yeah.
As opposed to.
Dr. Thetty has been working very closely with DCF over the last few months to expedite that process, because we absolutely were frustrated, quite frankly, that investigations were taking on an average 45 days, so.
And that's part of the meeting that Chris and law enforcement and Amy and I and we all
It's all
met
wrapped
together. It was
together.
all wrapped into one big thing. They're not going to give on their time frame. They're going to do their investigation, but they recognize that we need to get employees back in the classroom as quickly as we can if it's appropriate. So we've been working with them on clarifying what they do, on what they say to people, you know, about outcomes, you know, like this person should be here or this discipline should be issued to that person because it's not their responsibility to do that. So we've gotten most of those things solved.
You think that'll lower the time period that it takes?
I think so. There are still going to be some cases where we have DCF and law enforcement involved together, and law enforcement does their investigation either first or concurrently with DCF, and sometimes those take a while. But for the majority of cases, they're trying to work with us to clear them quickly.
Thanks, sorry. Now, Mr. Novelli, I apologize for cutting you right there.
Mr. Novelli, Robin Novelli, Chief Operating Officer, will now provide us the purpose and the revisions to Board Policy 8405, School Safety. Mr. Novelli, you're up.
All right, so 8405, policies being revised to clarify the procedures regarding school safety, security, threat assessment teams, and other changes in compliance with applicable Florida law. Particular areas of revision include the following: school safety and security plan, school safety specialist responsibilities, board responsibilities, best practices, active assailant response procedures, persistently dangerous schools, victims of violent crime, and threat assessment teams. So as you look through that, working hand in hand Chris here and Amy. We had, this policy existed before, and much of that language and many of these topics are still part of what we have, but there is a lot of new law that needed to be implemented into our policy, and we had Neola guidelines for that. But the easiest thing to do in this case was to strike the old language and insert the new language that was guided by Neola and formatted to flow better and to find better through the outlining procedures of Amy Enbo and her gang. So if you look at the red line draft, it's probably the best way to take a look at what's there, and each category is listed with a separate large alphabetical letter, most of which were in the previous version, some of which are new, and some of the Neola language was just tweaked to fit our district a little bit better.
Does this help us comply with a lot of the new board stuff with Douglas?
I'm sorry.
Yes, it does. This is a lot of these changes are promulgating, especially the threat assessment team. Language is promulgated by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in the Senate Bill 7026 and 7030.
Thank you.
I have a question on B3A.
B3A.
District School Safety Specialist, number 3, item A. Are you there?
I am there, based on the findings.
How in the world are we going to review the school security risk assessment findings and recommendations at a publicly noticed board meeting? Provide the public an opportunity to hear the board members discuss and take action on our school safety plan. However, the plan is confidential.
Exactly.
How do we do that?
That was his answer.
Why is
I've
that?
asked the same
Yes,
question.
so it's
It's the way the law reads.
It is,
and,
it
and
is.
yet, that's my
Yeah,
exact question that I asked when I read it.
So if you remember in the past, Major Walters has come and done a closed session security meeting that said, hey, this is what the plan is in detail. But then he turned around and did a public meeting where it was sanitized and did not expose any of our specific safety and security plan technicalities, if that makes sense. So, yeah, how logistically this is going to be, this is one of my topics that I want to discuss at my conference next week.
Thank you, because
Yes.
it then goes on to say, like, that's what was running through my head, like, all right, Andy's done some, but then it goes on to say very specifically, provide the public an opportunity to hear the board members discuss and take action.
That's the new language.
Which we don't.
No, it doesn't say
We make
spec-
decisions in closed session even about, well, we take action on the big things publicly.
Well, you're gonna buy cameras and you're gonna, big things, those kind of things.
Yeah, it's
Are
all-
public, but.
I think it would, the presentation in the public would be very general.
Yeah.
The board has made the decision to prioritize security cameras.
Not we're buying this type of a camera and there's gonna
For
be this
this
many in each
school and
school
this
and
many.
these
Here's the points,
locations
and
and,
we're putting
right.
this and that.
We're not
Every-
going to do the
It's
report.
written kind of crazy.
If it's voted on tonight, we're not going to be distributing that.
Correct. When the large security assessment is completed, we may bring forward 3 priorities after a closed session. The board has identified from our security assessment these priorities, X, Y, Z, period.
It says the actual plan is confidential. It doesn't say you have to discuss the actual plan
Right.
publicly. It says you have to discuss strategies publicly
Strategies
and take
and
action.
activities.
Putting up more
So,
fences, putting up more.
We want single point of entry. Thank you, all approved, yes, move forward, and then the actual plan is secure. and
It says
closed.
here, we will review the school security risk assessment findings and the recommendations of the district school safety specialist at a publicly noticed board meeting.
And the recommendations of the safety specialist. The safety specialist is just the designated person at the school.
No, that's him. He's the district safety
Okay.
specialist.
And so you're going to recommend to us,
He's gonna provide recommendations to the superintendent and the board, which identifies strategies and activities that the board should implement in order to improve school safety and security.
So that high level presentation,
if we didn't
need
have single point
cameras,
of
we need
entry,
single point, we
right.
need this, and that's all we have to talk about publicly.
But the plan itself, with all those intricate details and everything, still remains confidential and exempt from disclosure.
I think it's clear-ish.
What the statute doesn't say is that the district school safety specialist is required to present the school safety and security plan to the board in a public meeting. That's what it doesn't say. It just says he's supposed to make recommendations based on the findings of the school security risk assessment and present the activities and the strategies.
So the evaluation that's on our agenda tonight, assuming we approve it, is that assessments?
Evaluation.
The
Security
Third-
assessment.
security
Third party.
assessments
Oh.
that we're going, that we may or may
solicitation.
not approve tonight,
Yes, ma'am.
it's on the agenda tonight. Do those fall under here as the school safety specialist's risk assessment findings?
No, this is based on the FSAT that the principals are undergoing right now. They're filling out 445 questions. Then I have to review those along with Andy, and we need to take a look at that and share with you by a date certain, I think it's October 15th or by the end of October, what we find from that FSAT. This assessment, or this security assessment that you're looking at for tonight's board meeting is going above and beyond that. And that won't be ready until sometime in February or March if we begin that shortly.
So this school security risk assessment is a very specific thing that you're completely clear of what that is.
No, I'm not completely clear.
Okay.
It is similar to what you were talking about that Andy did last year, and Andy's been involved with that this year also, but part of the law talks about in October having these done in each school system.
These security risk assessments, as it's titled in this, it's an actual thing that's being done with 400
Based on the
questions
FSAT information.
ish. And you're going to, what are you told in your instructions to give back to us from that? You said you're gonna report back to us, so is that high level stuff you're reporting back to us?
So in a closed session, I would assume we would get together and talk about more specific things, and then in the general session, high level. But I don't have specific directions on how to carry this out yet.
Okay, so we do what we want.
At this point.
So, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
So as I read the policy, I went through it, and we had school safety specialists. The whole thing, I didn't know if we wanted to say school safety and security specialists. It kind of jumps back and forth for continuity. Does that make
No,
sense?
because our school safety and security specialists are our guardians.
Okay.
Now we're really getting confused.
But we do have a district school safety specialist.
But that's identified by the
Perfect.
state
Yes,
title.
it's a statutory, right.
So we
Right.
can't mess with that
No.
title.
All right. A2, about midway through the paragraph, it says the board. Do we want to put the school board in there and add it?
Where are you?
A2,
We can,
just for clarification purposes, because it says the board. If we go to B1, oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
B1E, it says coordinating with appropriate public safety agencies is defined that are designated first responders to a school campus conduct a tour of campuses once every 3 years. Would we want, is that where we want, or do we want to do
That's
one
the
year?
statutory requirements.
I don't know what they want. Are you guys okay with once every 3 years, or do you want to move that up to once every year?
So this tour is section 5 of this year's FSAT. If the FSAT doesn't change, this is going to be a yearly thing anyway.
Okay.
This year's FSAT included it, there are 6 sections, and the 5th section is a tour.
Who exactly are we referring to when we say first responders? Does that mean
Okay, so
we're bringing
the
in the
tour
firemen,
is-
the
yes.
ambulance driver,
No,
everyone in the whole community that's a
Fire
first
and
responder?
law enforcement, along with the principal and other people at the school site, they take a look at the first 4 sections of the FSAT, all the data that they've collected, and then they take a look at how this is implemented while the kids are there. What does arrival look like? What does during the regular school day look like? What does dismissal look like? And it even asks for them to come back at night to see what the lighting is.
I think that has to be done annually. Things change a lot in 3 years, people change in 3 years.
But he's saying it's already gonna be done
Built into
every
the
year.
FSAT.
So if it's done into the FSAT, it's already happening?
So the law says 3
Why
years,
can't our
but it's built
policy
into the
reflect
FSAT, so
It's an annual requirement,
Is-
one would
For now.
assume. But
unless they change
the
it.
FSAT did change this year from last year. It was 200 questions last year, it's 445 questions this year.
when I saw that when I was reviewing the policy, I thought, well, if we're only doing it every 3 years, sometimes
But
things
who's
change,
counting?
and one just kind of throw it on there.
Funny.
Could we not say, a minimum of once every 3 years?
That makes sense.
Could we not just say once a year?
Are we gonna make Robin lose his mind if we do it once a year? 'Cause I'd kinda
Robin's
like
right
to
there,
talk
keep
to
your
him.
eyes come.
Does this, if you've already got it in another area, I just know that sometimes schools change within a 3-year period. And with security being the way it is, I thought that, but if you've already got it covered through another,
No, it should be consistent. I don't know, I think we get everything else ready. I mean, we got a huge spreadsheet from you that was beautiful about every little detail, air conditioning,
You set the bar
bus,
too high, Robin.
you know, didn't me? There should be a tab that said law enforcement stopped by and everyone's eyes were on again. And everybody's on the same page for security to kick off this school year.
I'd be
That's-
surprised if they
Okay.
don't already do that, but I don't know.
I have a question. In E, the Florida statute that was referenced, I just linked over that, and that's on the prohibition of certain obscene telephone communications.
365, 161?
Yeah.
I think we took this off the oldest template.
Okay, cause I'm like, wait, I'm looking, I'm like, maybe it's somewhere down here, no.
Wait, maybe it's supposed to be an 8 instead of.
And I looked 2018 is the same one. 2018.
Hey, great job, Ms. Campbell.
Yeah, nice catch.
Yeah.
I didn't check statute.
Mr. Novelli, how much extra work is that a huge massive extra work? It's already being done. Can you explain? I don't want to cause you more work. I just was kind of concerned that things change every 3 years, you know what I mean?
365, 161.
This is
The deal is
the
like
principal,
365,
right? The
165.
principal's coordinating with their community, making sure their law enforcement, if it's the city of Satellite Beach, it's Mr. Pruitt making
Another
the
discount.
I know.
Chief gets over there
I just get
once a
yelled at
year.
every time I come up with an idea, it costs a
All
lot of work,
chapter
so I'm trying to make sure
365
we
is
don't
about
cause a
using
lot of work
telephones
without
from
it
fax
being done.
machine
Trying to be
and stuff.
respectful.
I'm just wondering,
So they
I'm
have the wrong,
expanding the question,
that's-
is it not just you, but it's
And
our
it's pretty
principals that
explicit, too.
will own that more
Right,
than anything.
so you're laughing at the point that I was making of 200 going to 445. That's on the back of our principles too. I don't know that next year's FSAT isn't going to be 600 questions, and and so anymore, what the state is asking principals and the rest of us to do just seems to be increasing every year. And so if they're saying 3 years on something, I just can't anticipate what next year is going to look like. Are they going to have something else in addition to that? So right now, like I said, if this FSAT continues the way it is, it'll be every year anyway. So it's up to you.
Is the FSAT in statute somewhere?
I believe so.
Yes.
I believe
I
it
believe
is.
so. Yeah. Not the specifics necessarily, but.
I think the FSAT has to be
Yeah, just
The
completed
requirement of the
annually.
FSAT is in statute.
Pardon?
The requirement of the FSAT is in statute.
I believe it is in statute annually.
All right.
I still would like to, hold on, we haven't
Oh.
come, I'm still fighting for a year. Is there anyone that agrees with me on a year?
I'm gonna ask.
I mean, I know that if I'm a principal, that you're gonna kinda wanna walk your school and meet with your first responders at the beginning of the year anyway. I mean, that's something that they should do, but I don't, again, every time I come up with an idea, sometimes it creates work and I get yelled at, so.
But as a school board, do we wanna set that as something that's a priority and important to us, that first
But-
responders are in each of our schools once a year, or are we okay with
But
every 3
have we
years?
not already done that? Cause doesn't that fall under the job description of our SROs and our security specialists?
Mr. Novelli, do you think that you could, just kinda put a side note down and say, hey, is it covered somewhere else that this may go, and then we can come back to it?
Just cause our SRO walked the school doesn't mean the local police department has been down there and knows we're building sixes and building, if there's an emergency, they need to
And
be
you're right,
familiar
there's
with
staff
every-
that changes at the local, so the reason that I looked at this was, is you have local first responders that change, providers of local first responders would change, fences, gates, people change, SROs change, people change, and if we don't have it worked out, that's all. So I saw it every 3 years, I was like, wow, I mean, I know that if I go to a school 3 years ago, a lot of my schools don't have the same SRO that they had 3 years ago.
My front
the
door's in
same.
a whole different place at Indy Atlantic. I mean, if you haven't been there in 3 years, you couldn't figure out how to get on that campus if you tried.
So that's, and I remember when we had a couple instances where you'd have an issue and the ambulance was trying to get, I just remember being a coach, being at different places, and when an ambulance is trying to get to your field, not knowing where the field was at was part of it too. So there is a concern there.
Okay, again, I
So
want it.
the verb here is coordinating with public safety agencies. So where we have an SRO, which is an increasing number of schools, that's not difficult. Where we have schools that don't have an SRO, it's dependent on that municipality's cooperation. We usually use a supervisor of SROs for that municipality. And then there's the fire departments vary by municipality as well. So, the burden is to coordinate these things and make sure that they happen using the sheriff's office, 10 municipality police departments, and 11 municipality fire departments.
I think we've hired extra security people in the security office under the sheriff's department to oversee our security, and there's no reason one of them cannot be coordinating this from their level that oversees the schools that don't have an SRO in them to make sure it happens.
Anybody else? We got a third?
Well, once we know what the statute really is, we can see which public safety agencies are
I think it's
actually.
defining public safety agencies, but that definition is not in that statute, right?
No.
Is there anybody else that has the intent of having every year having coordinating agencies at the beginning of the year?
I think it is a phenomenal idea to make sure that we are connecting with, so I'll give you an example. I ran into Chief Lau of High School Police Department the other day, and he was saying that typically they do a breakfast for our principals every year, and they do it at the PD. But this year, they're actually going to do individual breakfasts at every school because he wants the teachers, the principals, the counselors, everyone to be able to start to build that relationship with law enforcement. And I think that is a really important thing for not just the SRO, but other agency representatives to have that relationship with the folks at the school. And I think having the fire department involved as well and knowing our campus and knowing the people there would be a great thing. My only concern is to put in here in policy that we must coordinate these people to come once a year, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure that this statement and the expectation of the FSAT is what we are really looking for. I think this is saying check a box that there was someone from the police department and someone from the fire department there.
Because
And-
FSAT's referenced right above in D.
Right. I think that we certainly can establish an expectation that we build those relationships with our law enforcement and our fire department and invite them in and make sure that they are familiar with the campus and give us input on any safety concerns that might exist and that sort of thing. But I don't know that that particular language is achieving the eureka that you have in your head, Ms. Deskovich. I think your
think it
vision might be a
helps.
little more in-depth than that.
Agree, but I think it sets the tone from the top of what our expectations are. And Titusville will do this, Satellite Beach will do this. There's a couple other municipalities that I have concerns about, or places where we don't have SROs, that if we just say, well, we really would like you to go do it, it's not gonna happen.
But can we force them to come
But this is specifically
in?
asking them to provide recommendations.
Uh,
This is not just come to our campus and see if we've made changes to the front office or whatever and how to get on. This is asking them to go through and give us recommendations.
If I could add one thing, one of the things that is part of this policy is establishing the threat assessment teams. And even in the schools that don't have an SRO, they had to get a municipal police officer to sit in and be part of their threat assessment teams. So every school has defined who that officer is, who will be the regular routine member. So even with schools without an SRO, they have a municipal contact that is part of the threat assessment teams. And above and beyond the threat assessment that is in our head that's being done, that we're going to be training schools to do around student threats, almost, I'm going to say every school we visited as part of the student services survey that we did found that the threat assessment teams were doing the drills and then the after action reports with those law enforcement agencies as part of that conversation. So we may have a tool through the threat assessment teams to maybe get closer on this, and I just wanted to
That's a
make
great
sure
point.
you knew it wasn't just the SROs that
The
could be
threat
involved in
assessment
this.
teams are already putting together exactly what we're trying to
So
do.
it's being done, so changing that to 1 year, the box should be easy to check.
For law enforcement, the threat assessment team doesn't handle the fire department.
It does
people.
not, that is correct.
Which is one of the biggest parts of, when we look at Stoneman Douglas, was the response by the fire department for those kids that were in, getting out there and understanding the school. So there is some point here.
Green. Can I ask one quick question as you all contemplate how to solve this issue? You all just went to the big meeting
4
on-
days.
So one of the things that we were told through FSBA and multiple discussions is that the school, the SRO assigned to a school cannot be the law enforcement officer assigned to the threat assessment team at the school. Did you guys hear that at all?
That never came up, not once.
Okay. Can you add that to your little list, please? Through our discussions with legislative committee and
That doesn't make
FSBA
sense.
and.
Doesn't make any sense.
That will be quite the issue, that we
Mr.
haven't heard that.
Mr. Navalli, can I ask a clarifying question? Your understanding of the section 5 of FSAT, which is a new addition this year, which essentially is addressed in D, correct? So we have to complete the FSAT according to D, both by statute and now our policy. What is the departure from what the function is of that section 5 in FSAT and what is being asked in E, except for that E is every 3 years? That question makes sense?
Yes, and I don't know the answer to that.
So you're saying
My-
So my-
D covers it, you could
I-
delete E is what you're saying, cause E is, it's happening in
Correct,
D.
or you could change E to every year because it's a redundancy
happening in
of D. So I don't know that there's a reason not to do either, whatever the
Well,
case is.
maybe
If-
D
if
doesn't cover, firemen, maybe D just
Does
covers.
section 5 of FSAT require fire department?
Yes.
Emergency response.
So E is redundant. Redundant but expanded.
Unless they change the FSAT tool next year and eliminate
And
section 5.
eliminate it, correct.
Perhaps E was there last year before the FSAT employed that as part of the FSAT as a tool.
Can we have any faith in Neola at this point on E with?
I'm gonna seek clarification.
Since they're referencing a.
Well, remember though,
My
this is our
point
policy,
is
so
I'm
we
not,
can-
I'm not
This
advocating
is our
to
policy.
strike E or to, I'm saying we could do one of two things. We can strike E because we know it's covered in D, but if it is the board's interest to emphasize that particular function that's rather buried in D and make it explicit to our community and our public, then it could be restated in E. And we're really not expecting or requiring or doing anything more than we're already required to do in D.
Right, but if D ever went away or changed every 2 years or something, E would still stand alone to make sure it's done every year. I just think if you go back and read everything from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, one of the major problems was just the chaos of people not knowing where stuff was and first responders showing up and just,
Not knowing access gates, not
Yeah.
knowing.
I'm just saying that if there was some discussion about the responsibility and so on and so on, there is no more additional responsibility with E than there is on D. So I would remove that I would suggest removing that from the consideration because it's gonna be done as part of D. So if it is reassuring to the board that it's explicitly in there as E, I would say leave it and put it as 1 year. I don't anticipate in all of the discussions around school safety that statute is going to be taken away. I did.
But I
So-
suspect we are going to revisit this policy next year because they're going to add a bunch more
So,
stuff.
correct,
So
yeah.
I move that we change it to every year on item E and put in the correct statute number, and then we can revisit it next year.
Correct statute
Have that
numbers.
other
It
stuff
could
in
possibly
there.
be .171.
That's, she had found that as well, so.
Does
Okay.
anyone have any problem with moving that to a year? Okay, Mr. Susan, back to your list, your lengthy list.
B1G, mental.
You have a list too?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. G.
Can I just say
Started with her
annually?
list.
You know what?
You were
See,
like-
I
you
did.
were
I
interviewing
kinda,
with her list.
you were at E, you jumped like 3, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm way up here, so.
Yeah, we
Would
went
you
back
like
and
to
got yours.
continue, Ms. Belfer?
Why
Go
don't we,
for it.
why don't we go this way? We're on B, E. Let's just go down. Does anyone have F or G
Wait,
concerns?
I have B.
Under B? No.
We're under B, no, yeah, we're B1, E is where we just were. So now we're
Okay.
doing B1F and G. And now we're on B2,
No, wait, BG.
BG,
Just real quick, BGs, right? B1G. B1G.
1G.
Providing or arranging the provision, youth mental awareness and assistance training to all personnel.
Sure.
So we're just, just clarifying, Dr., or Mr. Novelli, that is to indicate who is providing that training to all personnel. Is that gonna be the security? Okay.
It is, we've been training, for over 2 years now. We have over 2,000 people trained. We have several trainers in the district already, and, what happened is that used to be administered through SEDNet. The money went through SEDNet, the training went through SEDNet, all the information went through SEDNet. They are now bringing it through the, district security specialist office.
Okay.
But SEDNet is still coordinating all of that effort, so, as soon as we get the money for this year, we'll set up the trainings for this year,
Okay.
and it's gonna be coordinated through, via Robin, through SEDNet,
Okay.
which is in my office.
Just curious on who was
Yeah.
doing that.
I have a question. I'm gonna
Go.
interject there. It's kind of an overall question. Is there anything in this new policy that we're not already doing?
Is there anything in this policy we're not
As I'm
already
reading
doing?
through it,
This
I'm like,
will-
oh yeah, we've been doing this, oh great, we're on this, oh we're doing this, are we
This
implementing
enhances
anything
the-
new, are we just now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, when we get
The
to that, speak up.
I will,
Yeah.
Okay.
the threat assessment training, yeah.
And the
Okay.
accurate assailant response procedures.
Okay, when we get there, please point that out.
Okay.
B1G, we're done with B1G?
Go.
B2. B3.
Yes.
Calling
B3.
bingo. I feel like I'm
B3B.
calling bingo.
B3B just states 30 days. Do we wanna make that calendar days? Do we wanna make that regular days? It was just to clarify.
B3A, is that what you're on?
B3B.
B,
I believe
three
that's
statutory.
Statutory?
Yeah.
Do we know what that is? Or just 30 days being?
It's calendar days, I
It's
think it
usually
says that in
calendar.
the statute, I think it's calendar days.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
C. C,
All-
1, 2, 3, 2. C2.
Yeah, hold on. Madam Chair, you are
You said
moving
C2.
quick. I am
Well, it's
hurrying.
4
I
o'clock.
know, I'm trying to get there. Hang on. See the board? Oh, okay, so it says here, appropriate and effective school discipline policies that prohibit disorderly conduct, the illegal possession of weapons, and illegal use, possession, distribution of sale of tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs by students. Does this include vaping?
Yeah, I think we changed that in the Code of Student Conduct. I don't have it sitting in front of me to be sure, and Patricia Fontan, my expert on all of it, just stepped out.
Okay.
But I believe we added vaping to the language in the Code of Student Conduct and in 50.
So vaping is under which one of those inside that?
It would be possession of tobacco.
Or drugs.
But
Or
some
drugs,
of the-
depending on what it is.
But some of the vaping is no drug, it's no tobacco, it's no nothing.
It's either nicotine or THC oil-based.
So if they're just vaping random water, we can't stop that.
They don't sell random water.
Well, don't they have like flavored, they have just flavored?
There is non-nicotine.
Yes.
For people that are trying to
vaping-
quit smoking.
Even the.
No, it has
even
nicotine.
the-
It has
nicotine,
nicotine.
yeah.
No,
Question
Yeah.
is, so only in the case of nicotine or THC through the vaping, we are only prosecuting those, but if they have a vape that they're using that does not contain those, what are we doing?
I can tell you that I've yet to see a vape case with a liquid that's not tobacco or THC. And as much as she was the authority on, the
Marijuana.
legalized marijuana, I've lived, breathed, and died vaping, unfortunately.
Okay.
And so, we just had another meeting yesterday for consistency as the laws have changed. And so primarily the prepackaged ones are nicotine-based, they just don't act like they're nicotine-based.
Okay.
And they don't advertise that they're nicotine-based.
Perfect. As long as you guys feel covered there, that's all my concern.
Myself, Major Walters, Ms. Moore, we all met literally just yesterday reviewing some of the changes in the law around vaping.
Yep.
Major Walters even contacted some additional deputies to go out to the vaping stores. So we literally did all this just yesterday.
Perfect.
Just to freshen up our knowledge on vaping since July 1.
Well, yeah, up to speed
And
on
I, and I
vaping.
want to correct something I just said, because vaping was a huge conversation in the Code of Student Conduct. And we decided not to specifically say vaping, because it was still a tobacco product or a drug.
Sure.
And we were afraid there were going to be other methods for dispensing,
love
whatever
that
it
kind of
is, so
policy,
we
right.
didn't narrow it down.
As
So
long as-
I
love
don't
that
want
kind
to
of policy.
mislead
I
you.
love that.
Okay,
Thank you.
C3.
Got it, yep, here, sorry. Security, should we put add security and safety procedures at school, or just security? We're okay there? It's just clarifying.
What, you wanna put what?
Safety and security procedures. as
Safety
opposed
and
to
security procedures at school and while students are on their way from, does that make any sense to you? Because we say safety and security best practices, number one. Then we go through and then it says security procedures at schools while students. Change it?
Okay, we're adding safety to
Yeah,
3,
safety and
Go.
or
4,
change to new language.
5. We're on to D.
Me,
D.
Ms. Belford?
just a very quick one, including the assessment of and intervention with, because we can't assessment individuals. Like, I mean, it doesn't flow, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Okay, that's good. E,
And E is one of these,
new,
new ones, and,
Okay.
the principals took care of that last
Bless
week,
you.
pre-planning with instructions from Major Walters that they received over the summer and documented that, so it's new this year and being done.
so the district has created and will include a silent response in the CL. Everybody good with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, F. F1, F2, 3, 4, 5. G.
I have a
Okay.
quick question, and this is just from Ms. Enval. We had violent crime, it talks about transfer here for a violent crime, I understand that. We now have statutory language that says they can also transfer due to bullying. Do we need to add that here, or is it covered in the other
No,
statute?
we're actually looking into like a Hope Scholarship policy, because Neola has one that is recommended, and so we're gonna take a look at that, so that'll be
Is
separate.
that something we can come back to? Good, okay.
H.
Yeah, H3,
Oh, right,
so-
AII.
Hold on,
This
H.
is all
we're
new.
gonna- They're gonna
This
start
is
with
all
H.
new.
Oh, okay.
You wanna start?
Is this Neola exactly? Did we change anything from Neola's recommendations?
I would have to, while he's looking to see if we changed any of Neola's recommendations, I'll just take you through where we're at. Last year, what we were directed to do was identify teams. The teams had specific people that had to be on the teams. And they had to take youth mental health first aid training, and they had to begin their threat assessments. They weren't defined, and so we began last year to try to define that. And we worked pretty much all year long on putting together how we were going to train our threat assessment teams using the research models that we had pulled. We were getting ready to roll out that training in June, and right before that, the state came out and said, nope, we have now defined our threat assessment training, and we have defined our threat assessment protocol and paperwork. So we scrapped our plan to train the teams and went to that training, and that's what Robin and I spent 4 days doing. The threat assessment teams are all identified. They all have at least started their youth mental health first aid, and most of them have their entire team trained. They have all been meeting on a semi-regular basis, and the vast majority of them are using their threat assessment team to, like I said earlier, to evaluate their drills and to do their after action plans. So what is going to be new? 1, 2, 2I, 2, 2, 2, and 2, 3. Are all the pieces that we were trained in. That who's gathering the investigation information and what are the procedures that they followed. That training, it was 2 days of threat assessment and 2 days of suicide prevention. And the statute brings both of them together, and it talks about if a child is a danger to himself or others.
And so we really, one of our big asks, what I addressed as one of the legislative asks I would like to push forward is that we separate those two, because the processes are entirely different. And most of that language was just kind of copied and pasted from Virginia across a lot of different states. But be that as it may, Robin and I and Janine Knight met. We met for probably 4 hours afterward to try to figure out how to roll out this training. We're going to start on August 23rd, rolling it out to what we think is a friendly group of people with district employees, directors, assistant superintendents, some of our resource teachers or social workers. We are then going to roll it out to our schools starting October 14th, from October 14th for 5 days thereafter. And so that's going to establish the policies, the procedures, the paperwork. The reporting mechanism is still up in the air. We met with Russell Cheatham. The state had a deadline of August 1st to have a reporting mechanism. It's still in its infancy. It's in its baby steps is all I can say there. So Russell has started to attempt to become a reporter on that system. That was last week. He's still not approved to be a reporter on that system.
Is it a state system?
It's a state system.
Of course.
So we're hoping that by the time we roll this out to the schools, we can be really tight on that, and that those systems are up and running. So we have a plan in place. We have a timeline in place. We have the state mandated training and paperwork, and now we just need to implement it through.
So, can I ask a quick question about the testing? This is just, so when we report to the state, what exactly reporting is it? Yes, we had please tell me they don't want the name, the age, and their address. Please tell me they don't want that.
The state hasn't we haven't seen what the state exactly wants us to tell them.
Okay.
We do have the state reporting forms. The state reporting forms are really comprehensive. It has all the information that you listed plus more. It's an entire investigative packet. It is the threat assessment, where you look at the threat and determine what kind of threat it is and what our level of response is and what our responsibility is for support after that threat.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing document, so if a threat changes from something that's just transient to something that really is substantive, that it's documented and that the support level rises. But we don't know yet what from all of that paperwork, and there's 15 documents in that paperwork. 15 documents in that paperwork. What from that paperwork is going to be required to report on a state level.
Okay. I was just curious.
We just haven't had access to
But
the
of course, we
system
had to
yet.
have this in place by August 1st, so.
Well, the portal that she's referring to, that Russell's working on, and,
Oh, Russell is here.
yeah.
Are you in yet?
No, it's still pending.
My
Okay.
understanding is the primary purpose of that is to provide information to the threat assessment team from other sources that they can use as they're making this assessment to access other records of these students.
My understanding is that it was to provide the state with information about what threat assessments were happening at what districts. So it's probably a little of both. That's the version where it's helpful to the district.
Now, Russell had to take.
I think it has several roles. There's a social media monitoring piece, there's a state reporting piece, there's the Fortify Florida piece. Anything that DOE has kind of put together is going to be in this security portal.
Okay. I will tell you, we asked these questions to the representative from the Office of Safe School that were providing the training to us, and she didn't have any answers either. Matter of fact, she wasn't even aware that certain information was going to be released on the day it was released. We told her before she could tell us.
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, well, so we're working through it, is what I can tell you.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank the both of you because
That's a lot of
That was
time.
at the end.
Yeah.
I know, it's right. Oh, that's
We got a couple more.
Matt's
They
not there
might-
yet,
They
so I'm
might,
gonna
they might not
intervene.
be so happy with what we're doing.
This is a lot of new territory for
Yeah.
school districts and a lot of new ground, and both of you are new in your jobs, and so it's new, and it's heavy, and it's big, and it's intimidating,
And there's no clear direction out of the
Right.
state.
Well, and
and
then-
it's still confusing, and the state's not even clear, but it's all very important in today's world too. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
I have my thank you when we're done.
It's not there yet.
Okay,
He's got a
H3AII.
couple things, but then he'll decide.
H3II. H3AII.
hold on, did anybody have any in H1 or 2? H3, Matt.
AII.
H3AI.
Say
it again. Say it again.
H3AII. H3AIII.
There it is, okay. Here it just says preliminary determination is made by either threat assessment team or through suicide, and it talks about the threat and stuff like that, but I didn't know if we wanted to add in severity of a threatened act, meaning student poses a threat of violence or physical harm to himself or others. And do we want to add anything about making an actual threat? Does that make sense to you?
No.
Poses a threat.
I think it poses a threat, I
Poses a
think that
threat.
covers that.
Okay.
I think because you would have to I'm hoping the state just wants to put substantive.
We'll run into
Or
a
very,
problem
or very
sometimes
serious
with gray
substantive.
area.
It's either
Right,
no
that's what
threat,
I'm hoping that they want. Yeah.
transient,
Right.
serious substantive, or very serious substantive. Those are the four
Oh,
categories.
those are the four oh,
Those
wow.
are the four categories. And just to your point, the threat assessment drills down to both poses and making a threat and posing a threat in terms of that
Same thing.
Evaluation
Beautiful.
process. Same
All right,
thing.
oh,
Yeah.
go, I'm done with H3AII.
Okay, H3B, C, H4.
Yes.
Okay, Mr.
Does this
Susan.
violate HIPAA in any way? Are we okay here?
Amy?
We are not a covered entity, so we do not violate HIPAA. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to read that.
I'll give you a heads up about this. And it's not a HIPAA, it's a FERPA. And it was
Sorry, whatever, okay.
it was a huge point of
Sorry.
contention in the meeting, and it was a conversation that we brought Amy in when we were sitting in that 4-hour meeting, and that there is a concern as part of the training, and part of the training is warning the victim of the person by name who is the known threat. And so we're working with Amy. She's bringing this to her conference.
That's another of my
We're
questions.
we're also really happy that we made this training October 14th and beyond because it's helping us gather the information we need. But there are some statutes on the books that say you have the obligation to warn the victim. There is some
Terrasoft law.
the Terrasoft laws. There is some even information within FERPA that allows you to do that, but there's even more information that makes everybody a little bit nervous about saying student name.
Especially if you have different professional certifications. Because
Well,
if you're a licensed clinical social worker, that might have different certification notification requirements.
And I looked up like statute 98.5.04, and it talks about intercoordinating agencies being able to basically circumnavigate FERPA and HIPAA and stuff like that. So, as long as it's on the radar, as long as we're looking at it.
On the radar. It's probably the thing that caused us the having 4 days of death and death. But that also made it to the radar.
Okay.
This NVOL, for our ethics training that's coming up, some to undetermined date that we might do.
October.
Might do with other,
Have you asked Paul yet?
No, I'm trying to make sure that we have the location and at least 2 anchor organizations, and then we have the list. They're on our list.
Can you cover some of this FERPA, just touch on it
We can do
sometime
FERPA
during
and
that?
HIPAA.
Because I'm thinking back to when we were at that period after Parkland when we had a bunch of threats, and we had law enforcement coming out giving names of students, and we weren't allowed to say the name. It was very.
Well, sometimes they do that now.
I know, but if we have many organizations from the community, if you've got county commissioners in there and us, and maybe I don't know who else will be in there for training, it would be nice to have a consistent, what's legal, what's not, and who can say what.
I will add that, yes.
Thank you. Okay, 5.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Susan.
Baker Act authorizations.
Oh, boy.
Who has the right here? Is that covered in this area? See this, like, mental health, abuse, suspected.
Yeah,
personnel,
and this is
all
why
the
we
policies.
really want to separate out threat assessment from SRI.
Got it.
We really want to get the legislators to make those 2 separate things because the threat assessment process doesn't appropriately or adequately address what goes on in an SRI process, a
Okay.
suicide risk inventory. So within our documents, we try to separate them out so that administrators know if it is a threat, if it is either a verbal, physical, whatever the threat is, here's the threat assessment process. If it is a suicide risk inventory, we
It's not.
follow a separate process, and
Got
I
it.
sent you guys that information, I
As
think
long as
last week.
that's, I saw that and it was just kind of a thing. Okay, I'm done.
6, I,
I have
J-
nothing else on this one.
Jay, and anybody have any other questions or comments?
No, I just want to say, thank you, you two, for everything that you guys did. We know that this is a big deal. I know that the school board is kind of like a Parks and Rec episode sometimes. So I think that, thanks to those of you guys that watch the show, I think you guys can appreciate that.
I don't know who was who, but yeah.
I could give you some, you know, I think it honestly depends on the day. The characters change, but, thank you. And, I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I know that this is stressful and we're actually leading in some of the other areas. I ask other school board members, have you done this, have you done that? Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh my gosh. So we're ahead of the curve, and thank you, Dr. Mullins, for.
Okay, we have one
That's it.
more
Okay,
policy,
good.
we're not done, 8407.
We only had to add 6 words, right?
Right. In a nutshell, that's it.
They're quick.
And the Office of Safe Schools.
Right, the Neola document did not have those 6 words on it, and we
I
found it.
have let them know and asked for a
We
discount.
found it in the law.
Good
and,
job. Yes.
And I haven't received
So
a.
we had just revised this a few weeks ago. We have to revise it again and add the 6 words.
And we had to pay for it to be revised again.
Oh, you
Except Mr.
guys.
Susan has 5 questions, so.
Real quick, A2.
We just passed this.
A2, go ahead.
Do you not want me to bring this stuff up?
No, come on, A2.
All right, we'll move quick. We'll just go to C1. C1 says that.
What is your concern with A2? Now's the time to do it, even though we're in a hurry.
We're in a freaking hurry.
It was the
I'm trying
same
to
thing
jump
about
in.
the safety in school, was it the same on the other policy?
Hang on, I'm sorry. I just pulled it up. Skip it. Go to C1. That was just a clarifier.
Okay, C1.
It talks here about the BCSO coordinating our specialists. Don't we do that?
Coordinating our specialists.
Right. I mean, they coordinate us, but aren't they kind of our employees? Does this create a gray area or anything like that?
No, sheriff's officer employee is the coordinator,
Okay.
right? Mr. Novelli?
I'm-
No,
Where
sorry.
are we
We're on
exactly?
C1.
C1, the
These
Do we
police-
supervise and control, or does BCSO supervise?
These individuals are
and control?
trained and supervised by the Brevard County Sheriff's Office, is that the set
Yes.
you're
Yes,
looking
sir.
at?
I just, it was something that, like, every time they have employment agreements, they have all that stuff, they come to us. And so I didn't know if we were in control of them or if
Okay,
the
so
BCSO.
they are trained by the sheriff,
Yes, sir.
okay, and they are supervised by the 2 sheriff sergeants that are contracted with us. And if they do wrong, the sheriff removes his blessing and they turn in their gun and the weapons and they're done.
Okay, so
We
that's
take them
completely.
through
Then
a
terminate.
policy.
It was just a
or
liability
procedure.
case.
Even
Okay.
though they're our employees.
Okay, and then C, and I'm sorry, does anybody else have comments
go.
real quick? C3, we talk about, here about provide board with evidence of the sheriff's demonstrating that potential specialists have met the requirements in FS 30.15, that's the requirements for their training. The requirements are only 144 hours, I didn't know if we wanted to put in, that we require 170 hours in the event that all
How
of a
about
sudden.
met the minimum requirements?
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. The way it's written, we follow it, we do all that stuff, but we go above and beyond. And I didn't want a void to ever occur where, since it just says this, that there would be, I guess it's in our MOU.
It is,
It's
it's
in
in our
That we do
solid.
170 something hours,
Yeah, we
perfect,
do.
all right, that's good, that was a question. All right, okay,
D?
nope, C.
Oh, another C.
We have frequency of psych evaluation and tests, background checks and drug tests somewhere. I apologize, I have it as C on my thing. Anyways, it talks about doing it at the beginning and initial. Seen it anywhere? I apologize. let me control.
B1A, perhaps.
No, it's C3, prior to appointing specialists. Oh, no.
Well, I know, but isn't that in the MOU that that's required? That's what I thought, because I know I've seen it, that they have drug testing and all this other background checks.
Yeah, but it's the frequency that I was talking about.
So it says in B1,
Hang on, I'll get
that
there.
the school resource officer shall A, undergo criminal background checks, drug tests,
Is it
psych
B1?
evaluations as part of their employment, but it doesn't say how often.
Just question, if the board wanted to put it in there that they have to undergo a drug test every year, an evaluation every year, background check every year, you know what I mean? We
I
do,
think we'd have to put that in our MOU.
Yeah,
we
we
have
would
a
have to.
frequency that we do, maybe something to think about in the future.
I would like to know what
I
other law
wanted the
enforcement
sheriff,
has to do.
what
Yeah.
does the sheriff do with their, I wonder with their people?
Good question.
I don't know.
I just
know
didn't want a
that-
security specialist to come on, and then something happens, we don't, because all of our volunteers, every 3 years, we have set times, right?
They'll have to renew their fingerprints every 5 years, that's part of our
Sure.
employment process, but the drug testing and psychological evaluation, that psychological evaluation
Done
is
at the-
specific only to this group
Right.
of employees, and it's done at the beginning,
Mhm.
before they're even selected for the,
The sheriff won't
training.
even put them in training if they don't pass.
And I
it.
I understand that, we
I
get a.
think if I'm understanding correctly, do we have an interest in having a more frequent psych evaluation because of the nature of their job?
A
Than
more
just at the
frequent.
beginning of employment? So,
Or define it, because as it stands right now, it's just at the beginning of
Right.
their employment. So the guy could be on for 6 years, be dealing with, we know how things flip, situations happen overnight. So I didn't know if we could, it's not only psych evaluations, it's drug test, background checks,
I
you know what I
think
mean?
that we need
kind of
to,
stuff.
get some guidance from law enforcement on that, maybe what they do currently,
Already.
right?
Yep.
And then go from
And that's why I
there.
was asking who supervises,
Yeah.
because then that determines who we were
So
actually
can
gonna be
someone
monitoring.
find that information out for us? I guess Mr. Melly, that would be.
So-
This is what I have nothing to do with.
Find out what the
You've done your
sheriff's
fair
standards
share.
are for,
Psych and drugs.
I
and
believe he has
Background.
recurring.
do they have
He's got
recurring
some
background, psych evals,
Maybe
drug,
background.
after the initial employment? But not just the sheriff, I guess start with the sheriff, and then we can go from there. But I think he kinda sets the standard for our district, so.
And then the last one is D. We talk in there about, it says notification of incidents involving school, officer discipline, firearm discharge, all that stuff. It says here, the superintendent is responsible for notifying the Brevard County Sheriff and the Office of Safe Schools immediately thereafter, 72 hours after the occurrence of a safe school action, if a safety school officer is dismissed for misconduct or dismissed. So if we do have BCSO controlling the dismissal.
Hold on, a safe school officer is Mr. Novelli, right?
No.
No,
An op-
What's your title?
He's district
District
school
school
safety
safety
specialist.
specialist.
The district school safety specialist. A
Don't
safe
discharge
school
your weapon.
officer is who, okay, that's what I thought
That
the
could be
title
an
was.
SRO
A
or
safe-
a guardian.
There you go.
Or
Okay.
a specialist.
Right.
All right, but
Our
do
specialist.
we dismiss misconduct? Anyways, when we were talking about the direction of who controlled those firings, hirings, all that stuff, we said BCSO was. This kind of says that you are
Have the
gonna be
authority,
you
yeah.
have the authority to notify. You see what I mean? So just some clarification there, but the main reason I brought it up was if we can add the board chair to be notified also, because sometimes some of these security specialists are a very hot button issue. We get hit with them, so one will leave because something happens. As long as the board chair knows and can disseminate that information correctly, does that make
I
sense?
think you got another issue though, because
Yeah, I know.
we said before that the sheriff
Right.
oversees and
So
can
then how does
dismiss,
he-
and this now
right.
says the superintendent
Yep.
dismisses.
No,
and
no,
does
just
he
for
just
trains and
supervise?
supervises.
So we work
No, Mr. Novelli said that or maybe you said it, maybe Dr.
There
Bell
are-
said, that if a security specialist does something wrong, the sheriff revokes his, and he's gone.
We work in cooperation. We've already
Okay.
done this process. We did it
Already happened
before the
once.
state even knew that there was something that needed to be done. So they got their first notification from us. And we work in cooperation with the sheriff's office on this particular issue. And then that issue came to you for approval. But we also I sent it on Dr. Mullins' behalf, the notification to both the Office of Safe Schools and Brevard County Sheriff, even though he was involved in the whole process.
Even though he knew
He
had
knew
to get
exactly,
official.
and we
If
covered
we
it.
can just have a catch-all to notify somebody on the board. That was the main part of that I'd like, if that's okay with you guys.
Well, it would have to be, because it has to be board approved,
Right.
dismissal.
No, but
Well,
there's
there's
two
two
different
different
things.
things,
This
yeah.
says within
Okay.
72 hours, I think
Of the
somebody on the board
occurrence,
needs to
Yeah.
know
like,
too.
this guy happens, whatever it is, so.
Okay.
Are we gonna
that's
have to
good.
advertise this policy again because
We
we
have
add the
already-
board chair?
No, so that's why we came here at a work
Workshop.
session.
Yep.
So we
Right.
can, because I want to avoid that, so we're good. We can still make substantive changes
Okay.
because we go to rule development workshop on the 27th.
So add board chair to that, please, somebody.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any
No,
questions,
I wanna see their
comments?
pins, their pins are cool. You guys are
Yeah.
awesome.
Nice.
They are nice.
Good job.
They are
I mean,
very
I'm
nice.
really,
I love
this is a
pumpkins.
great
Mr.
initiative.
Novelli, you have a pin? You've been here a
Mr.
long
Novelli.
time.
They didn't have one that big.
They don't have
the
a-
numbering
They don't have a
years.
60, is what it is, so.
There's nothing other than this. All right, this meeting is adjourned. We're gonna, no, it's not adjourned, Miss Enval.
Well, we can discuss
hand out to you all, and
Yes.
if you wanna add that
Yes,
to,
bring that, let's do
I'm
that
going
real
to,
quick.
I'm gonna step out for 1 second.
Yeah.
I don't
Like,
think,
please do.
but we can release staff for
Yeah,
this
they
one.
can go.
Good, they don't need me. Wait, you need to direct staff.
Me too, but we need to give the thumbs up to move forward on this, I think. Is this what I think it is?
Uh-huh. If you please take one and pass it
Amy
on.
getting somebody else.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I know we've talked about it.
No, bring it on, bring it on.
No, I mean, you just make a motion to do it.
Yeah.
This is passing out.
This is it.
Hey, thank you guys, what?
We're still in session.
Yeah, we
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, we appreciate you and all of your hard
Thank you.
work.
Board Chair, I'd ask that we add this to the agenda for today's workshop. It's not on the agenda?
I don't think so.
I have extras.
Yes, I wasn't sure who we needed. I'll take back the extras.
Did our board double in size?
I wasn't
since
sure.
the last time
Well, I
we did?
wasn't sure if there was gonna be anybody here,
No, it's.
cause I'll give copies to,
You got that? You wanna hand that to Russell?
if they want. That probably wants one.
Yes,
And-
please, thank you.
All right,
Okay.
turn the time over to Ms. Enval.
So, we have discussed at my evaluation, my request, and now it's becoming a plea, for additional assistance. And so, what Juanita's been doing actually, for quite some time, she's been contacting like agencies and asking, we've kind of done an evaluation of, the number of staff they have in their legal department, the number of employees that the agency employs, if it's a school board, the number of schools that the district has, and, we fall to the bottom with our staff. We are only a staff of 2. And so I would like to respectfully request permission, and I don't really know how to do that, but to move forward and potentially allocating the,
Holy moly, I just got to the middle column.
yes, so,
Of the legal
so,
teams of
yes,
the
the first column is the agency. The second column is the salary of the attorney over that agency. You'll see my salaries there, Ms. Bentley's salary. The sheriff's office just hired an in-house counsel, in some other districts as well. And then the next person in charge, their salary threshold. And then you'll see the total number of legal staff in each of those departments. Like I said, the Brevard County Sheriff he just added his first in-house person. I mean, it's like 2 weeks old. So we're not sure if she has a person or not. But just to show that, I feel like I'm doing the work of many attorneys, and I think that we really need, honestly, another attorney who could specifically be dedicated to HR-related issues, and I think that's where our main issue is, and where our main monies are. I did not make copies of this, but I can send it to you all electronically. I
How
had,
much money is the salary need to be?
well, I don't know that answer. But I'm trying to figure out, we have already allocated this money, and I haven't asked Penny to do anything either. We've already allocated a lot of this money. I mean, it's already being spent historically. Last year, for instance, we spent roughly, just in HR, and I just looked at HR, this has not been an in-depth thing, but roughly just in HR, 17, 18, 25 plus 8 plus 122, so what is that?
Okay. So what I would like to do is just make a motion to allow her to move forward with
Yeah.
investigating and possibly putting together a job description and
So-
do you need
so
to bring
far-
that back to us or?
I can, so I have job descriptions already that I've liked to
Let's just give her,
use.
let's just give it to her, 'cause she's
But
been
just for
coming to us
instance,
like
so
a
far
year.
with Allen Morton Blue this past fiscal year, 18-19, we spent $160,000. I still
Those are
think
the guys that lost all of them?
that was Allen Morton Blue, just
What
with
is their
them.
win-loss record?
I don't have that.
I mean, no.
Over time, I don't know.
Because the nice thing would be to say, look, we're losing.
But we can
and
have
we're
someone
spending.
who is dedicated to do arbitration, someone who is dedicated to do impasse. It doesn't mean that we won't still have to hire outside, because we may, depending on the litigation. That's the problem with litigation, it's unknown.
You need labor attorney, right? Isn't that what we're
Yes.
doing?
We're talking labor attorney.
We need like a
Yes.
Mose, a guy that just goes in there and says no, and he's just. no,
So
no.
it
Is
looks
there
like-
anyone opposed
Remember
to
that
Ms.
guy?
Enval's
No.
request?
Yeah.
No.
Can we then give consensus direction from the board because we can't vote in a workshop, right?
Right,
Right.
well, it'll have to be added to the budget, or moved around, wherever that money came from
Well,
for that.
the way we funded that in the past is that miscellaneous reserve we've had at the bottom, as legal things come up, we fund the legal stuff. So we'll have to look at the budget and see where we can allocate. I can tell you traditionally, we've spent somewhere between $125,000 and $175,000 on just the labor portion.
And it looks like here Seminole and Pinellas 108 and 114, I mean, we seem to be right
So
in there somewhere.
if I do get another person, I can't have someone freshly out of law school. I need someone who
Right.
has some experience and some knowledge, and I need to make the salary attractive enough to be able to compete with our other local agencies. So I would have to,
What would that be
bring it up.
about?
So if you're just looking, let's just look at, trying to think, look at Brevard County government, your second one down. Their next person in charge, one of their assistant county attorneys makes 113, but their county attorney makes 183. If you look down, if you wanted to switch like school district to school district, look at Seminole. They're second in charge.
What do you need from us right now?
I need permission to create a job description, which I've already created, but I would have to bring it to you for the board, for board approval, but then also just allocate the money that we have been spending. I don't really know how the budget process works, but
You'll
I
have to
need
work,
help.
you'll work with me and Dr. Mullins to establish the budget for that.
We
We'll
all
bring it-
agree.
I agree.
And
Bring
just
forward a
like we-
proposal.
Yep.
Just
Agree.
like we took the time to say thank you to those two, Amy, we know that you are breaking your back, your neck, your legs, and your arms, and we
Yes.
appreciate all you're doing, and we all agree that we need to move forward.
The other thing I was gonna mention that might help, oh, sorry.
That's all right, go ahead.
Second year clerkships in law schools, they have, your second years have to do clerkships, right? And those are
So
like
we could
basically
do
internships, we can
do
get some of those
an
kids.
internship too, but that requires a lot of supervision. And
Come on, they're law school students.
I
Amy.
understand that. I've supervised law school students before, and I actually taught law school students before. And so I did internship when I was at the state. We had some interns,
the-
and that was very helpful. But I would need somebody else.
But at the
because
worst case, you could at least just send them to keep other people busy.
Yes.
I would like to request, if we could, that we provide direction that Amy be able to move forward as expeditiously as possible, meaning I don't personally need to have,
And you
I
said
don't
what
wanna
you need
hold up
from
the
me.
process to
Right.
have her bringing things back to us to approve that we don't necessarily need to approve. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Like,
Yep.
I don't need to approve the job description, I'm assuming
have
will
to
have
do
to
the
be
job-
approved
that's by
at a board
policy.
meeting, but
Yeah.
as, the faster that we can move this
We will
along
keep the
without
board
us.
informed and move forward, getting it on a board agenda, so
Yes.
the approval is expeditious. We won't wait for a workshop to bring back a proposal.
Yes.
Is that what it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Go forward.
I'll give it to Rochelle. to put
Go
in our
forward and
comment.
make
We'll put it
haste.
on the-
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other
Thank you,
questions,
Amy.
concerns, comments, issues? Adjourned. We are supposed to be in a meeting 30 minutes ago, so
15 minutes ago.
So does
But
anyone
you-
know